I returned to Joint Base Lewis McChord at 06:40 on a cold May morning in 2025, moving through the dining hall like a shadow no one cared to see. That was the point. I was supposed to be invisible. A civilian systems analyst badge hung from my neck, a small green rectangle that meant access to nothing important, or so everyone believed. My real rank, my real past, the reason 4 generals were already inbound to this base were all things no one in this room could imagine, especially not the man laughing the loudest. My stepbrother, Ethan Lockhart, Navy SEAL team, 7 golden boy of our family hero to everyone except the people who actually knew him, stood in the center of the crowded hall surrounded by a pack of SEALs who fed on arrogance the way wolves feed on blood. He spotted me instantly. Of course he did. He had always been good at singling me out, the one thing he excelled at long before he ever earned a trident. Look who finally crawled back. His voice echoed across the room. My wonderful sister, the world-class nobody. I kept walking, my breathing stayed steady, 4 and hold, 4 out, hold 4. The pattern drilled into me at Bragg, at Coronado, at the places that do not appear on maps. Ethan stepped into my path, blocking me with the casual cruelty he had perfected since childhood. What rank are you again? His grin spread slowly, daring his teammates to laugh before he even finished the sentence. Coffee runner, some kind of office pet, or just a civilian pretending she matters. Laughter erupted. Sharp, mean, familiar. The same sound from the same lips I had heard when I was 15, trying to hide bruises from the man my mother married. The same laugh that echoed when Ethan shoved me down the stairs and said I fell. The same sound that convinced me I would never belong anywhere until the military taught me otherwise. I kept my voice level. You do not want to do this, Ethan. He leaned closer, breath hot with cafeteria coffee and ego. Oh, I want to do it. Want to do... These guys deserve a show. Come on, sis, tell them your rank. They roared again. He pressed harder. And while you are at it, tell them how you barely made it through basic. Tell them how mom and dad thought you should just stay home and be useful. Tell them. I did not move, did not blink. Chief Warrant Officer Ramsey, sitting alone at a table in the back, saw the stillness and stiffened. I felt his eyes studying me slow, deliberate like a man recognizing something buried under a disguise. He watched my stance, the way my feet set automatically in a braced position, the way my hand rested near my hip out of habit, the way I scanned the exits every 2 seconds. He knew, or at least he suspected. Ethan pushed again loud enough to silence half the room. Tell them your rank, Marin. Give us a laugh. Something in my chest tightened, not hurt, not fear, but something colder, the familiar calculation that happens before an operation shifts. I answered quietly, higher than you think. The room broke into louder laughter as if that line was the punchline of the century. Ethan clapped his hands, mock applause. That is adorable. You hear that, boys, she outranks a SEAL. The humiliation was the point. It always had been. In his mind, I was still the girl with hand-me-down jeans and silent bruises who never fought back. But today was different. Today, I was here for a reason bigger than Ethan's ego. I was here to find the person leaking classified intel from SEAL Team 7, the same intel that had gotten operators killed and nearly destroyed entire missions. I was here because my file marked KIA in 2023 was a convenient fiction in a classified program called Sovereign Ghost. I was here because someone on this base believed I was dead. Someone needed to believe it. Someone dangerous. Ethan shoved my shoulder. Answer me. Say it. Say your rank. Before I could reply, the building shook. Not violently, not like an explosion, but enough for every trained instinct in the room to flare awake. The low thunder of rotors rolled through the air, growing louder with each second. Conversations died. Forks froze halfway to mouths. SEALs looked at each other confused because no one had been scheduled to land here this morning, certainly not like this. 4 UH-60 Blackhawks descended in formation onto JBLM's parade field, their engines roaring so loud the windows trembled. And for the first time that morning, Ethan's grin faltered. The helicopters touched down and the doors opened. 4 generals stepped out. 4. Not 1. Not a delegation. Not a courtesy visit. This was a movement, a statement, a shockwave. The entire dining hall pressed toward the windows, craning their necks. Ethan laughed nervously. Well, well, looks like command is here for someone. Must be a big deal. His friends chuckled. I did not move. My breathing stayed even, because I knew exactly who they were coming for. Moments later, the doors to the dining hall opened and the 4 generals entered the room in full-service dress uniforms. Conversations died instantly. Ethan straightened, puffing himself up, expecting recognition, expecting praise, expecting everything he had always believed he deserved. Instead, the generals walked past him without a glance. They stopped in front of me. All 4. The highest ranking among them held my eyes and with a crisp, precise movement raised her hand in a salute. The others followed. The room exploded into silence. Commander Lockhart, she said. Welcome back. Ethan's mouth fell open. My rank, Ethan, I said quietly. That is my rank. I walked out of the dining hall with 4 generals behind me and an entire base frozen in stunned silence. But the truth is that my return to Joint Base Lewis McChord had started long before the salute that shattered Ethan's arrogance. It began in a dim hospital tent in northern Syria in October 2023 when I stared at a ceiling made of canvas and realized the world believed I was dead. The blast that tore through our convoy had been no accident. The investigation that followed confirmed what my instincts already knew. Someone inside the system, someone with clearance, someone with confidence, had sold our location. 3 operators died on that road. I should have been the 4th. JSOC needed a ghost to hunt a traitor, and I fit the bill. My chain of command initiated the Sovereign Ghost Protocol, which meant wiping my official record clean, sealing my last movements under layers of classification, and issuing a death notification to my family. I remember the exact moment they told me I would not be going home. Commander Lockhart, your status will remain KIA until further notice. You will operate under deep cover. That phrase, until further notice, stretched into months, then into years, until my own reflection felt unfamiliar. You learn to detach from everything, including the people who were supposed to love you. In my case, that detachment had started long before Syria. My family had been broken long before any battlefield. My mother remarried when I was 12, choosing a man who hid cruelty behind charm, and a uniform hung proudly in the hallway. He smiled at church dinners and snarled inside our home. His words sharp, his hands sharper, always finding a way to bruise without leaving marks that mattered to anyone except me. And Ethan, my stepbrother, became his partner in everything. Even before adolescence hardened him into someone meaner than most adults, the signs were there. He mocked me, pushed me, cornered me, told me no one cared. My mother believed every lie he told and every story he crafted to make me the villain. I learned early that justice in that house was not for me. When I turned 18, I enlisted. Not because I dreamed of serving, but because it was the only door leading away from them. The Army became home first in a survival sense, then in a deeper one. Structure, rules, accountability, things my childhood had never offered. I rose through the ranks quickly, my aptitude for intelligence work and close quarters training catching the attention of people who did not advertise their interest. By 27, I was tapped for a program that operated without patches, without public records, without recognition. The place where silence is a weapon and identity is fluid. The part of the military that does not exist for anyone who has not been inside it. That life shaped me, taught me patience, precision, discipline. It removed the helpless girl Ethan used to shove into walls and rebuilt her into something sharper. When JSOC told me someone in the Navy pipeline was leaking intel to outside contractors, I knew it was only a matter of time before I was called in. The leak was small at first. Months of unusual file access patterns, transfers masked as training summaries, movement reports logged at odd hours. It escalated fast, costing 2 reconnaissance teams their element of surprise. Whoever was behind it knew exactly what they were doing. And someone wanted Ethan's Unit Team 7 to take the blame. When the order came, it was a single sentence delivered through a secure channel. Return to JBLM, Identity Civilian Systems Analyst. Mission objective, infiltrate monitor. Identify internal leak. Secondary directive. Maintain sovereign ghost status until operation concludes, which meant I walked into the base with a badge claiming I was a contractor with minimal clearance. The kind of person no one looks at twice. The kind of person Ethan had always believed me to be. The humiliation he threw at me that morning was predictable. The arrogance, the taunting, the assumption I was still beneath him. It was familiar enough that I barely felt the sting. What mattered were the details he did not know. He had no idea I was alive in Syria when they buried an empty coffin back home. He had no idea generals briefed me directly. He had no idea that the investigation he mocked me for was the reason classified aircraft flew halfway across the country to land on this base. My assignment was clear. Someone in or around SEAL Team 7 had access to files they never should have touched. My job was to move quietly through systems routines, hallways, and schedules until I found the crack. I kept my posture small, my presence smaller, blending exactly the way sovereign ghost operators are trained to do. Stay forgettable until the moment you no longer need to. JBLM felt different under this false identity. I had walked these grounds before in uniform with insignia that meant something. Returning as a civilian consultant felt like stripping off a skin and stepping into an old memory. Every soldier who passed me saw what Ethan saw: no rank, no authority, no relevance, which worked in my favor. The truth was simple. I was here because someone on this base had blood on their hands. I intended to find them, and no one, not Ethan, not the officers who laughed along with him, not the traitor who thought a dead commander could not hunt them, knew what was coming next. I was 13 the first time I realized the walls in our house did not protect me from anything. They only trapped the sound. My stepfather, Robert Lockhart, had a way of lowering his voice before he struck as if silence could make his anger more precise. He was a retired military policeman who believed discipline meant domination and that respect was something you beat into a child, not something you earned. Ethan learned that lesson early and twisted it into something worse. He was a year older, already bigger, already favored, already allowed to break rules that would have gotten me locked in my room for days. When Robert hit him, it was a gentle correction, a tap, a warning. When he hit me, it was punishment. When Ethan shoved me, Robert called it sibling roughhousing. When I cried, my mother said I was too sensitive. That phrase stayed with me like a bruise that never fully healed. You are too sensitive, Marin. Stop overreacting, Marin. Toughen up, Marin. She never said those words to Ethan. He was the pride of the family, the athlete, the golden boy, the future soldier my stepfather bragged about to neighbors. I was the burden, the responsibility, the weight they wished would obey quietly. By 14, I understood the pattern. Ethan insulted me. Robert laughed. My mother looked away. The cycle repeated until the routine felt rehearsed. Ethan discovered early that he could earn praise by humiliating me. He mocked the way I walked, the way I studied, the way I dressed. He called me dead weight. He called me useless. Robert rewarded him for it with approving nods. When I defended myself, the punishment came fast. Do not talk back to your brother. Respect the men of this house. You are lucky we take care of you at all. At 15, Ethan cornered me in the kitchen during one of Robert's drinking evenings. He pushed me into the counter hard enough to bruise, then laughed when I winced. Robert walked in, saw the scene, and smiled like it was proof his son was becoming strong. He never asked if I was hurt. He only said, "You need to learn your place, Marin." That was the sentence that shaped the soldier I would become. I learned to stay quiet, not because I was weak, but because I was waiting. I learned to observe, to anticipate, to control my breathing when the world narrowed into a moment of impact. All the skills that would save me years later began as survival tactics in that house. At 16, I discovered one truth that changed everything. The Army had recruitment programs for high school seniors, and they did not require parental permission if you were close to 18. Enlisting became my exit plan, the only door out of a home that felt like a fire that never went out. I spent nights studying, training, planning, not for glory, but for escape. When I finally left the house 2 days after my 18th birthday, I did not look back. I expected anger from my mother, but she only sighed in relief, as if my absence simplified her life. Robert called me ungrateful. Ethan laughed, said I would wash out of basic just like everything else I tried. Instead, I thrived. Boot camp felt easier than home because at least the yelling had purpose. At least the discipline was earned. At least the bruises were accidental, not intentional. My drill sergeant saw potential where my family had seen inconvenience. He pushed me hard, but fairly, and for the first time, I felt myself growing into someone who did not flinch at every raised voice. I excelled in marksmanship intelligence analysis and hand-to-hand training. My instructors noticed the way I processed information quickly, the way I stayed calm under pressure. Ethan noticed too, but he twisted it the same way he did everything. While I climbed through training cycles, he spun stories back home, claiming he had taught me everything I knew. He bragged that I was riding on his future military legacy, not the other way around. He bragged that I would always be beneath him because in his mind, rank was inherited, not earned. When he joined the Navy and eventually qualified for buds, my mother held a celebration dinner. When I made sergeant after 2 deployments, she forgot to call. I became the ghost child, the one who escaped the family narrative they built for Ethan. They wanted him to be a hero so badly that my achievements became an inconvenience. I watched from afar as Ethan shaped himself into a man who measured his worth by the number of people he belittled. He carried Robert's philosophy into adulthood, believing that respect was something you demanded, not something you demonstrated. When he earned his trident, he sent me a single message. "Bet you are jealous." I never responded. The truth was simpler. I had already surpassed him years before he ever touched the ocean. My work with JSOC pulled me into missions he could never be cleared to know existed. The deeper I went, the less my family recognized me and the less I needed them to. But toxicity leaves stains even when you walk away. Every time I returned stateside, their shadows followed. The dismissive voice, the mocking laugh, the hands that hurt more than they helped. They lived in my memory like ghosts. That is why the humiliation in the dining hall, the laughter, the taunts, the way Ethan puffed his chest in front of his teammates did not break me. It felt like a replay of a chapter I had already survived. The difference now was simple. Back then, I had no power. Now, I outranked everyone in that room. They just did not know it yet. The first morning I arrived at Joint Base Lewis McChord under my undercover identity, the air tasted like wet pine and jet fuel, a mix that always reminded me of deployment rotations. The sky was a heavy gray, the kind Washington wears like a permanent uniform, and the roads glistened from a night of thin rain. I stepped through the main checkpoint carrying nothing more than a government-issued laptop bag and a badge marked with a green stripe, the color designated for civilian contractors with limited system access. It was the perfect camouflage. Green meant unimportant, and no one on a military installation wastes time studying the unimportant. Sovereign Ghost Protocol demanded invisibility, and invisibility thrives where people assume you have nothing to offer. The guard scanned my badge, barely glancing at my face. "Contractor Lockhart, welcome to JBLM. Temporary Housing Unit C-19, Access Level 3. Stay within authorized zones." His tone was automatic, like muscle memory. He had no idea the file tied to my real name was buried behind more encryption than most intelligence officers ever see in a lifetime. I nodded, offered a neutral smile, and kept walking. Contractors drift around bases all the time. IT support network analysts, systems, auditors, logistics, techs, people whose presence is necessary but rarely worth acknowledging. That was my cover. A civilian systems consultant brought in for software diagnostics and the occasional routine audit. In reality, I was here to map the digital fingerprints of a traitor. I followed the marked path toward the admin wing, keeping my footsteps light and measured. Every movement I made had to match my identity. Contractors do not move like operators. They do not glide through hallways or mark exits or track sightlines. They shuffle or hurry or wander. They carry weight differently. I softened my posture, lowered my chin, slowed my pace. But habits die hard. Even when I forced myself to blend in, some parts of me refused to hide. And that is exactly what Chief Warrant Officer Ramsey noticed. He was standing near the operations office, coffee in hand, flipping through a maintenance binder when I passed. He was in his early 60s. Silver hair, cropped close, deep lines carved into his face from decades of deployments and command rotations. His rank patch had faded slightly from sun exposure, the kind of wear that only comes from being out in the field more than in an office. His eyes lifted when I walked by, and for a brief moment his gaze sharpened, then narrowed. He studied the way my steps hit the floor evenly, my shoulders lined with perfect balance, my breathing slow and controlled. He looked at the laptop bag resting against my hip and noted something only someone trained for decades would ever notice: the position of my hand hovering near where a weapon would be if I were armed. I caught the shift in his focus, but kept walking, keeping my expression neutral, casual, civilian. Contractors are not supposed to scan a room yet. My eyes moved instinctively across the hallway, checking corners, assessing spacing, identifying who was paying attention. Only Ramsey. Only him. I continued forward, pretending not to have seen the flicker of awareness in his eyes. If he suspected something, it was not enough to name. Not yet. My identity papers were perfect, the background story airtight, the clearance stamped by people who outranked anyone on this base. Even if he voiced his suspicion, it would lead nowhere. In the admin corridor, I saw the familiar figure I had been mentally preparing for. Ethan leaned against the wall, chatting with two other SEALs, his posture relaxed, his confidence radiating outward like heat. He wore his uniform like armor, the trident on his chest gleaming with the kind of shine only someone who polishes it extra for attention bothers with. When he saw me, his eyebrows shot up, his grin spreading like oil across water. "Well, well, look at this. Did not know they let nobodies in through the front gate." The SEALs beside him chuckled, glancing at my civilian badge. "Green stripe low clearance, meaningless." I kept my voice cool. "Contractors go where the work is." He laughed louder at that. "You always did love hiding behind busy work, sis. Guess some things never change?" His casual cruelty rolled off him effortlessly, as if he had been rehearsing it his entire life. In a way, he had. His attitude toward me had never evolved beyond the teenage version of himself who thrived on power he never earned. His teammates looked between him and me, curious but uninterested. Contractors were background noise, and I was exactly the background they expected. I gave him a non-committal nod and tried to move past, but he stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "Where you headed?" "Got some keyboards to fix." More laughter. I kept my breathing steady, grounding myself in the rhythm that had carried me through far worse than this. 4 in hold, 4 out hold. Nothing in his voice surprised me. Nothing cut deeper than memories I had already survived. I finally sidestepped, maintaining the demeanor of someone too accustomed to being dismissed to bother arguing. My objective was not him, not yet. My objective was the leak hidden in the network traffic patterns of his unit, the kind of leak that did not happen by accident. As I reached the end of the hallway, I felt Ramsey's eyes again. He had moved closer, leaning subtly against the doorframe, pretending to read the binder in his hands. But I saw it. He was watching me. Watching the way I avoided conflict without shrinking. Watching the way I carried myself even when pretending not to. Watching the way Ethan tried to get under my skin and failed. Contractors break under pressure. Operators do not. And Ramsey had spent too many years reading battlefield posture to miss the signs. I made sure to adjust my pace, make it just uneven enough to pass as someone without training. Yet I felt the weight of his gaze following me. He did not know my name yet. He did not know my history or my mission or the reason 4 generals would eventually land on this base before noon. But he knew one thing with certainty. I was not what my badge claimed. I was not a nobody, and that single doubt was dangerous enough to matter. By the time I reached the dining hall later that morning, the smell of powdered eggs and burnt coffee hung in the air like a fog. Contractors usually sat near the edges away from the uniformed personnel, and I intended to do the same. But Ethan had other plans. He spotted me the second I stepped through the doors, and I knew from the shift in his posture that he was about to perform for an audience. He slapped the back of a nearby chair, signaling to his teammates. "Come on, boys, look who crawled out of the shadows again." The SEALs at his table turned. Most of them carried the usual Team 7 confidence, the swagger that came from grueling training and a lifetime of being told they were the elite. Some wore arrogance well. Some wore it like a mask. Ethan wore it like skin. He waved me over as if he owned the room. Hey sis, why don't you come tell my guys what you are doing here? Or better yet, tell them your rank. A couple of his teammates snickered. Another murmured something under his breath that made Ethan grin wider. I stayed still, neither approaching nor reacting. That irritated him. He needed a stage. He needed me to play the part he had written since we were teenagers. He pushed his chair back, scraping the floor loudly as he stood. He walked toward me with exaggerated confidence, spreading his arms wide so everyone could see the show. Internet attention does not just come from strangers. It can come from one foolish soldier with too much free time and a phone in his hand. That soldier was Corporal Avery, barely 20, fresh-faced, still too new to understand that recording humiliation for entertainment could ruin careers. He lifted his phone, angling it discreetly, though his expression gave away just how excited he was. I could hear the faint sound of the camera app opening. Ethan leaned in close enough for me to smell the toothpaste he had barely rinsed. So tell us, what are you now? A helper, a temp, someone who fixes broken printers. His voice rose with each question provoking. The table behind him erupted with laughter. I did not move. I kept my breathing steady, watching the space around me, not him, the way a predator watches angles, not noise. Ethan hated that. He needed me flustered. He needed me to shrink. Come on, Marin, tell them. You remember rank right. You remember what it is like to answer to someone better than you. His teammates joined in. One said, maybe she forgot what military life is like. Another added, maybe she never really belonged. The laughter grew sharper. It felt like the house again. My childhood home, not JBLM. The mockery, the taunts, the way Ethan stood taller every time he pushed me lower. He wanted a reaction, and the SEALs around him encouraged it. That was the danger of pack mentality. One predator becomes 6. Avery, holding his phone, whispered, "This is going to blow up online." Ethan heard him, and his face lit up. "Perfect," he said. "Let's give everyone a reason to laugh." He stepped closer, closing the distance. I saw Ramsey in the corner of the dining hall, his tray frozen midway to a table. His eyes narrowed the way an old warhorse recognizes the opening notes of a familiar battle. He knew something was wrong, but he did not know how deep it went. Not yet. Ethan raised his voice. "I asked you a question. Tell us your rank." A hush fell across the nearby tables, not because they respected him, but because everyone loves to witness a spectacle. I answered the same way I had earlier. Calm, controlled, measured. Higher than you think. More laughter. Ethan clapped slowly, mocking me. "Oh, that is rich. Guys, you hear that? She outranks a SEAL now." His teammates cheered, and someone thumped the table in amusement. Avery whispered excitedly, "Man, this is gold!" The phone hovered higher, trying to catch my expression. Ethan circled me, half blocking my exit. "So what are you really? A nobody with a badge, a ghost from admin. Some failed soldier assigned to desk duty. Speak up, sis. Tell the world." That familiar tightness formed in my chest, not from fear, but from memory. The echo of 16-year-old me pinned against a kitchen counter while Ethan smirked over my shoulder. Trauma has a way of living inside muscle memory. It never fully leaves. It just waits. Ethan shoved my shoulder. Not hard enough to knock me over. Just enough to assert dominance. Just enough to tell everyone in the room he could. That was the moment the dining hall shifted. The shove was small but symbolic. Family violence transported into a military environment. Old trauma reenacted under fluorescent lights and security cameras. Ramsey straightened the moment Ethan's hand touched me. He stepped forward an inch, then stopped himself, evaluating, deciding whether to intervene or watch closer. Ethan shoved me again. "You hear me? Answer me!" The SEALs hooted. Avery adjusted his phone, trying to get a better angle. Ethan was waiting for me to react, to break, to give him something he could use to confirm the story he had always told about me. Useless. Weak. Beneath him. But I had not been that girl for a long time. I kept my voice steady. "You do not want to push me again, Ethan." He laughed harsh and quick. "Or what? You going to file a complaint? Tell command. Cry. Tell mom." His face moved closer. "Do something." He shoved a third time, harder. The room erupted with amused gasps. That was his mistake. Chief Ramsey set down his tray. His chair scraped loudly. He stepped forward slowly like a man who had spent 40 years studying conflict before stepping into it. He did not say a word. He simply watched. Ethan did not notice. He was too lost in the performance. He raised his arm, pushing again, but before he could make contact, the low thunder of helicopter rotors rolled across the base. Conversation stopped. Laughter stalled mid-breath, and for the first time since I walked in, Ethan hesitated. He glanced at the windows confused. The shove never landed. The humiliation had peaked and the downfall had begun. He just did not know it yet. The hours that followed the confrontation unfolded slowly, each minute heavy with the kind of tension that settles in the air when the truth sits just beneath the surface. After the dining hall incident, I retreated to the systems office assigned to me, a small room tucked behind the comms wing with outdated equipment and a window that looked out onto a row of idling Humvees. It was the perfect place for a contractor to disappear into routine. It was the worst place for someone like me to hide for long. Because operators carry their training the way soldiers carry old injuries. It shows when you least intend it. And Chief Warrant Officer Ramsey noticed every sign. The first signal came when I logged into the secure diagnostics terminal. Contractors with level 3 clearance usually take their time with dual-factor authentication. They hover, they second-guess, they type slowly. But I had spent 10 years moving through systems far more complex than anything at JBLM. I entered my credentials with fluid precision sequences of numbers and letters flowing from memory rather than hesitation. My fingers tapped in a controlled rhythm, each movement exact, each pause intentional. Ramsey, standing at the doorway, pretending to review a maintenance log, lifted his eyes at the speed. Contractors should not know the interface that well. Contractors should not type like people trained to break firewalls under fire. He said nothing, but watched longer than a casual observer should. He lingered there even after I completed the login far too quickly for my cover identity. The second signal came 15 minutes later when an operations sergeant rolled in a tactical display screen for routine updates. He left it unfolded in the corner, the map frozen mid-refresh marking the latest training zones and helicopter flight corridors. It took me 3 seconds to realize one of the map layers was mislabeled. A training route marked blue connected to a cleared area designed for medevac drills, but the second portion extended into an unregistered corridor used for classified low-altitude flights. That mislabel could get someone killed if a pilot followed it blindly. Without thinking, I stepped forward and adjusted the layer settings, identifying the error and correcting the color coding with the kind of automatic familiarity that comes from years of mission planning. Contractors do not read tactical maps. They certainly do not correct them. When I turned back, Ramsey was watching again. This time, his head tilted slightly as if he were piecing something together. The third signal appeared when sunlight cut through the blinds, catching the inside of my forearm as I reached for the printer. The tan line revealed the faint raised scar I carried from Syria, a thin, pale slash that traced the edge of my radius. It was the kind of scar you only get from shrapnel, the kind that leaves its story on your skin long after the mission ends. Contractors did not have shrapnel scars. Ramsey's eyes narrowed. He looked away quickly, pretending he had not seen it, but I knew he had. Old soldiers always see the marks of war. The fourth signal slipped out when someone in the hallway dropped a clipboard. The sudden clatter ricocheted through the room, sharp, fast, unexpected. Before I could stop myself, my breathing shifted into the 4-count pattern drilled into me in every stress scenario. 4 in hold, 4 out hold. The rhythm that slows heart rate under gunfire. The rhythm that keeps hands steady while carrying wounded teammates through smoke. The rhythm that no civilian contractor on Earth would instinctively fall into. Ramsey caught that too. His gaze flicked to my shoulders, noticing how square they became, how grounded my stance looked after the noise. He set his binder down and stepped farther into the room. "You all right?" His tone was casual but testing. Completely. Just startled. My answer was steady, but I knew it was the wrong kind of steady. Too controlled, too practiced. His eyes scanned me the way a battlefield medic evaluates an injured soldier. He was not looking for fear. He was looking for training. And he saw it. The fifth signal came not from a mistake, but from who I was. You cannot bury military bearing no matter how deep you try to hide it. The way I walked through hallways gave it away. The way I carried weight evenly across both feet. The way I never turned my back to a door. The way I responded before people finished speaking to me. My posture betrayed years of habit, every muscle shaped by discipline, not desk work. Ramsey stood beside the door, pretending to check structural reports while watching my reflection in the glass. I made myself slouch slightly, adjusting my stance, but even that looked unnatural, like an actor pretending to be smaller. He finally spoke, low voice edged with curiosity. "You been in before?" His question was casual but deliberate. Contractors often had prior service. It was a safe probe. I kept my tone neutral, briefly. Administrative support, nothing significant. That answer satisfied most people, but not a man who had spent 40 years telling the difference between those who serve in offices and those who serve in shadows. He studied me more openly now, his expression shifting from confusion to suspicion. The kind of suspicion you cannot train out of a good warrant officer. Not the bad kind, not the threatening kind, but the kind that says, something here does not fit, something is missing, something is hidden. And he was right. Nothing about me matched my badge, not my breathing, not my reflexes, not my posture, not the scar, not the way I could correct map layers at a glance, not the way my eyes swept the room every time someone entered. He stepped closer, resting one hand on the doorframe. "You do not move like a contractor." His voice was quiet enough that only I could hear it. I lifted my eyes, slowly meeting his. And that was the sixth signal, if there could be such a thing, the one that convinced him he was absolutely right. I did not flinch. I did not bluff. I simply held eye contact, steady, with the calm of someone who had stood in briefing rooms with people whose decisions shaped continents. "You are not what you say you are you?" He whispered it, not accusing, not threatening, just stating fact. I did not answer. I did not need to. Silence was its own confession. Ramsey exhaled once, slow and knowing. And in that moment, I saw the truth land fully in his mind. She is not a contractor. He knew it long before anyone else did, but he did not yet know how big the lie was, or how high the ranks involved would reach by noon. By late morning, the dining hall had filled again with the usual noise of service members grabbing early lunch, clattering trays, and half-shouted conversations about training schedules and aircraft maintenance. Contractors were expected to avoid peak hours, which meant every set of eyes turned toward me when I entered. I kept my pace slow-controlled, carrying the persona of someone who did not belong but was used to pretending she did. Ethan saw me before I took 3 steps inside. He stood with a cluster of SEALs at the far side of the room. Laughter, booming loud enough to draw attention before he even said a word. He slapped one teammate on the back and pointed directly at me, the gesture wide theatrical. "Well, boys, look what we have here. Guess she just cannot stay away." Another SEAL snickered. "Maybe she wants to see what real soldiers look like." The group laughed, and Ethan welcomed the attention like oxygen. His ego thrived on an audience. He straightened his shoulders, letting the trident on his chest catch the overhead light. Years of being rewarded for bravado had shaped him into someone who believed the uniform was enough to make him untouchable. He strutted toward me, stopping only when he was close enough for me to smell the cologne he used too heavily. "You know, sis, these guys were just asking about you. I told them you tried to join the army once. Tried being the key word." More laughter. I said nothing. Silence infuriated him. It always had. He took my quiet as a challenge and leaned in. "I told them you washed out of your first unit, that you could not keep up that command, moved you to desk duty before kicking you out entirely." He grinned, eyes gleaming with cruelty. "Dead weight. Nobody. Failed soldier." Each word dropped with a deliberate pause, as though he were doling out judgment from a place of superiority. The SEALs behind him smirked, entertained by a narrative they assumed was true. A contractor with a green stripe badge was not worth questioning. I let their assumptions settle. Let Ethan bask in the illusion he had power. Let the room believe the version of me he sold them. Because ghosts are strongest when ignored. But Ramsey was watching. He stood near the back corner, his food untouched, his weathered eyes locked onto me, and he saw something no one else did. Not fear, not humiliation, but a shift, a sharpening. The moment when my eyes turned colder, precise, calculating. Ghost mode. It was the same expression operators carried before breaching a door or slipping into an enemy-held valley in darkness. It was the expression of someone who measured everything in angles and exits. Ramsey stiffened. Ethan did not notice. He kept performing. That is what you always were. Useless. Even in this place you stick out like someone who has no idea how anything works. You should be grateful they let you in at all. He said it loudly enough to command the entire hall's attention. I stayed still, expression neutral, but internally I was reviewing maps, timelines, and threat vectors. Ghost mode is not emotionless. It is controlled, distilled, lethal in its silence. Maybe you just missed me, I said quietly. The SEALs burst into laughter. Ethan barked a laugh so hard he slapped his thigh. Miss you. Right. The only thing I missed was not having to see your pathetic face every holiday. I kept my eyes steady on his no reaction, no flinch. The lack of expression made him uneasy. He needed my pain to feed his performance. He stepped closer until his chest nearly touched my shoulder. You are lucky I even acknowledge you. He reached for my arm, intent on dragging me toward the exit like he used to when we were teenagers. The old way he asserted control in that house, the way our stepfather taught him. Ramsey moved before anyone else did. A small shift forward, almost imperceptible, like a soldier preparing to intercept an impact. I felt his presence but kept my posture loose the way someone playing civilian would. Ethan's fingers hovered an inch from my sleeve. Touching a contractor in front of witnesses would be enough to bring disciplinary heat, even for a SEAL, but Ethan did not care. He wanted to humiliate me, wanted the room to laugh at my helplessness, wanted to relive the dynamic he had relied on his entire life. He never got the chance, because that was when the first tremor rolled through the air. Low at first, so low it blended with the hum of ventilation, but distinct enough that every trained soldier in the room straightened instinctively. A sound you only hear on deployment or during VIP movement. Rotor wash. Ethan paused, his hand frozen mid-reach. The SEAL behind him lifted his head. That sounds like Blackhawks. Another answered, but no flights scheduled today. A second tremor hit louder, stronger. Trays rattled, drinks quivered. Conversations died mid-sentence. I felt the pressure change in the air as the helicopters dipped lower. The distant whine sharpened into the unmistakable chop of UH-60 rotors cutting down through cold Washington air. The SEALs moved toward the windows, instinctively drawn to the chaos outside. Ethan hesitated, then followed, muttering something about training exercises. But there were no exercises scheduled. Not for aircraft like these. Not in formation. Not on a weekday morning with no warnings issued to base personnel. Ramsey looked at me instead of the windows. His eyes widened not with fear, but with the dawning realization that everything he suspected was about to be confirmed. He whispered under his breath, "This is not coincidence." The entire dining hall pressed against the glass as 4 Blackhawks descended onto the parade field in perfect synchronized formation, the kind reserved only for the highest level of command movement. Soldiers saluted out of reflex. Officers straightened their uniforms. Ethan turned back to me, irritation creeping into his expression, as if somehow I had ruined his performance by refusing to react. He opened his mouth to speak, but the helicopters touched down, rotors screaming, engines roaring, sending wind rippling across the windows. The doors blew open, and the world Ethan thought he controlled cracked wide open, because the moment those generals stepped inside, mocking me, became the last mistake he made that morning. The wind from the Blackhawks' rotors slammed against the dining hall windows with a force that silenced even the loudest voices. The entire room collectively held its breath as 4 UH-60 helicopters settled onto the parade field in a synchronized descent so precise it looked choreographed. Soldiers gathered at the glass. Officers stepped outside to get a clearer view. Conversations died instantly. Nothing like this ever happened without warning. Not on a quiet weekday morning. Not on a base this size. Not with this many high-ranking aircraft landing at once. Ethan's posture puffed up immediately. He straightened his uniform, smoothed the front of his sleeves, checked his trident twice as though preparing for an inspection. His grin grew smug, the kind of expression he wore whenever he convinced himself the world revolved around him. "Look at that," he said loudly to the SEALs around him. "Must be VIP brass checking in on Team 7. Maybe they heard about our last eval." The SEALs laughed, some out of camaraderie, some out of habit. None of them questioned the absurdity of the idea. Brass like this did not fly in for evaluations. They flew in for national-level emergencies, for classified operations, for things so far above Team 7's awareness that they could not imagine the implications. But Ethan was lost in his own fantasy, probably coming to meet with command. He looked right at me as he said it. "Maybe they will want to speak to real soldiers today." The doors at the entrance shuddered once when the wind changed direction. Then they burst open. 4 officers stepped inside. Not colonels, not base commanders, not inspectors. 4 generals walked into the dining hall in full service dress, each bearing rows of ribbons and medals that marked them as people who belonged to rooms where global decisions were made. They walked with a calm that only comes from decades of authority. Their presence alone shifted the air. The first to enter was General Carolyn Rourke, the PACOM commander, whose strategic decisions influenced half the world's oceanic operations. Her posture was razor straight, her eyes sharp enough to cut through lies on sight. Beside her strode Lieutenant General James Weaver, deputy commander of JSOC, a man whose name circulated in whispered stories about missions no one could officially acknowledge. Following them was Major General Hal Warren, a systems warfare expert known for dismantling adversary networks so thoroughly they never recovered. And bringing up the rear was Brigadier General Naomi Trent, the youngest of the group, but easily the deadliest with her expertise in unconventional threat response. 4 generals, 4, on one base, in one dining hall, at once. The room froze so completely it felt like the world had stopped. Forks hovered inches from plates. A cup slipped from someone's hand and hit the floor without a single person reacting. Even the SEALs straightened instinctively, training taking over as they pulled themselves into rigid attention. Ethan's eyes widened and he ran a hand through his hair as though trying to make himself more presentable. A self-satisfied smirk tugged at his lips. "This is it," he whispered to his teammates. "They are here for us. Maybe for me." The generals walked past the front counter, past rows of soldiers, past Ethan's expectant stare. They did not look at him. Not once. They did not slow near the SEALs. They did not acknowledge Team 7. They did not even glance toward the officers lined up in confusion near the wall. They walked directly toward me. Ramsey saw it coming seconds before anyone else. His head snapped toward me, his eyes widening thoughtfully as though every silent suspicion he had held since morning suddenly aligned. The generals stopped 3 feet in front of me. The dining hall fell into an unnatural quiet, the kind of stillness that precedes seismic shifts. I stood perfectly straight, the civilian badge still hanging from my neck. The badge that lied. The badge that had protected my mission. The badge that now meant nothing. General Rourke met my eyes first. She nodded once, subtle but unmistakable recognition passing between us like an encrypted signal. And then it happened. 4 high-ranking generals raised their right hands in a synchronized salute directed at me. At me, not at Ethan. Not at Team 7. Not at any officer in the room. The salute was crisp, sharp, and unmistakably formal. A gesture reserved for those who outranked them, or for those whose service demanded the highest level of respect. Gasps rippled through the hall. A tray crashed to the floor. Someone whispered, "Dear God." Ethan stood frozen, mouth open, eyes glassy with disbelief. His entire body locked as though his nervous system had overloaded. His ego had no script for this moment. General Rourke's voice carried across the silent hall with the authority of someone used to commanding thousands. "Commander Lockhart, your mission parameters have shifted." My cover shattered with a single sentence. The murmur that passed through the dining hall grew into something louder. Shock, awe, confusion. "Commander who?" "What?" Ethan's expression changed slowly, piece by piece, from confusion to disbelief to a dawning horror that drained the color from his face. He stumbled back a step, bumping into one of his teammates. "Commander," he whispered, voice cracking. His gaze snapped to me, searching for confirmation, for denial, for anything that made sense. The weight of the truth landed on him with crushing force. "What? Commander?" His voice broke on the last word. He finally understood. He had spent the entire morning humiliating someone who outranked every person in the room, including him. And now the entire base had witnessed it. The public exposure was complete. The silence after General Rourke spoke hung in the air like a suspended blade. Every soldier in the dining hall remained frozen, as if the slightest movement might shatter the moment into something too enormous to contain. Ethan's breathing turned shallow, his chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven bursts. He stared at me as if he were seeing a ghost. In a way, he was. General Rourke stepped to the side, motioning to Brigadier General Trent, who immediately handed her a secure tablet encased in reinforced black housing. Rourke tapped the screen, her fingers moving with the certainty of someone who had seen these files more times than she cared to count. Lieutenant General Weaver, second in command of JSOC, stood behind her with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the room like a hawk tracking battlefield movement. The tension tightened not only around Ethan's throat, but around the entire hall. No one breathed too loudly. No one dared speak. Rourke's voice cut clean through the stillness. "Lockhart's record. Full clearance." Her words were not a request. They were an order. Major General Warren stepped forward and connected the tablet to the secure uplink installed on the wall. Contractors never touched that panel. Most officers weren't cleared to. Only top command could access the classified layers buried beneath the standard system. The screen lit up, filling the dining hall with a cold white glow. Soldiers leaned in despite themselves, curiosity overpowering etiquette. Ethan looked around, expecting someone to stop this, to intervene, to tell him the whole thing was a misunderstanding. No one did. The interface loaded slowly, as though the system itself understood the weight of the moment. Then it appeared. A single page, a single file, a single line stamped across the top in red. "KIA reactivated." The words burned through the room. Every pair of eyes snapped to me. Ethan's knees buckled as if someone had kicked the back of them. He caught himself on a chair, gripping so hard, his knuckles blanched. He whispered, "No, no, no, that means—" Rourke enlarged the file without shifting her expression. A photograph appeared beside the red stamp, me in uniform, younger but unmistakable. Below it, rows of classified designations scrolled down the screen. Sovereign Ghost Protocol. Deployment Syria 2023. Mission status compromised. Operator status mortally wounded. Presumed killed. Official record. Fatality confirmed. Public notification executed. Internal classification asset reactivated. Level sovereign. The room erupted in murmurs, quickly strangled by a sharp glance from Weaver. Ethan stumbled forward, shaking his head, eyes wide with disbelief. "That's impossible. We held a funeral. We buried her. They sent a casket." His voice cracked as he turned to me. "I saw the flag folded on Mom's table. They said you died. They told us you were gone." His words hit the air with the desperation of a man trying to rewrite reality. The entire dining hall watched him unravel. I lifted my chin slightly. "They told you what they needed you to believe." Ethan shook his head violently. "No, no, they would not. They—" His voice broke again. He swallowed hard. "Why would they lie?" General Weaver's voice cut in deep and unyielding. "For operational security. The Sovereign Ghost program requires full erasure. Even family is not informed, especially family." Ethan turned back to the screen, staring at the red stamp like it was a death sentence he had never seen coming. His lips trembled. His voice dropped to a whisper only those closest could hear. "You were dead. They said you were dead." I met his eyes. "I never died. They just stopped telling you the truth." He recoiled as if the sentence itself hit him. His chin quivered. The SEALs behind him stared at him in stunned disbelief, caught between sympathy and second-hand humiliation. Because now it was clear. All his bragging, all his insults, all his mockery had been directed at someone whose clearance outranked his entire chain of command. Someone whose missions he could not even be briefed on. Someone he thought he could drag around a dining hall in front of spectators. The humiliation he intended for me curled back around him like a whip. Public exposure had not just begun, it had detonated. Rourke continued speaking as though this revelation were routine. Commander Lockhart was declared KIA for purposes of asset protection. She was reassigned under silent classification to sovereign operations. Ethan blinked rapidly, his emotional collapse unspooling in real time. "Sovereign," he whispered. "Sovereign." He choked on the word. "That's above JSOC Black. That's above everything." His voice cracked. You were in that." Every SEAL in the room stiffened. Even among elite units, Sovereign Ghost was rumor whispered in barracks at 2 a.m. A myth, a monster under the bed of America's enemies, the kind of operator who lived in shadows and died in silence. And his sister, or rather the girl he spent most of his life mocking, was one of them. Ethan staggered backward into a table, bumping a tray onto the floor. A metal fork clattered loudly, slicing through the silence and making him flinch. His breathing became ragged, panicked, exposed. I held his gaze with a calm that was colder than any anger. "You spent years trying to convince everyone I was nothing." I stepped closer, my voice quiet but unbreakable. "But you never bothered to ask who I became after I left that house." His eyes filled with something raw, a mixture of betrayal, shame, and the dawning realization that he had destroyed the only version of the story that made him feel superior. Weaver turned toward the screen and locked the file again. The image disappeared, the red stamp vanished, but the truth lingered in the air like smoke. General Rourke straightened her uniform jacket. "Commander Lockhart, your mission parameters have shifted. We will brief you privately." The room watched as the 4 generals stepped aside, making space for me to move forward. Every soldier there understood what that meant. Ethan understood most of all. His voice rose barely audible over the blood pounding in his ears. "What, Commander?" The humiliation was complete. The world had just flipped, and for the first time in his life, Ethan Lockhart realized he was standing on the wrong side of it. For a moment, after the generals stepped back, there was a strange kind of stillness in the hall. The kind that comes before storms, before collapses, before truths people are not built to handle. Ethan's face shifted through disbelief, denial, and something far uglier. Then the panic hit. He pointed at me with a shaking hand, voice cracking under its own weight. "She is lying. She has to be lying. This is some kind of setup. She is not a commander. She is not—" His words tripped over themselves as if even his tongue refused to follow him anymore. "She is faking this. You cannot possibly believe she outranks everyone in here. You cannot." His desperation echoed across the hall. No one answered, not even his SEAL teammates. General Weaver's expression hardened. "Lieutenant Lockhart, enough." Ethan snapped toward him. "She cannot have higher clearance than me. I am a SEAL. I have been on missions you cannot even imagine. She is a—" His voice faltered when he realized everyone was waiting to hear what insulting word he would choose. "A civilian, a fake, a nobody." Chief Ramsey shook his head slowly, disappointment settling on his features like dust. "If she is a nobody, son, then I would hate to see what you think of actual command authority." General Rourke stepped forward, her tone clipped and sharp. "She outranks everyone in this room." Ethan's mouth dropped open. His voice dropped to a hollow whisper. "Everyone." Rourke didn't blink. "Everyone." Lieutenant General Weaver added, "Commander Lockhart carries sovereign designation. That supersedes all operational units assigned to this base, including SEAL Team 7. The words landed like mortar rounds. Ethan staggered as if physically struck. But shame is a dangerous thing in the wrong hands. Shame can turn into fury with terrifying speed. His face flushed red, his breath harsh. He jabbed a finger toward me again, voice cracking with rage. You think you can walk in here and pretend you are something. You think you can humiliate me in front of my team. You were nothing. You were always nothing. His voice shook, and the fury twisted into something even more unstable. You were dead. I made peace with that. You had no right to come back like this. The last sentence hit something dark in me. Something old. Something that had once learned to stay quiet under fists and threats and rage that did not care how young the target was. But that girl had died long before the world declared me KIA. What stood here now was someone reborn in fire. Rourke lifted her hand slightly a warning to the MPs, but Weaver watched Ethan closely. He could sense the unraveling. I stayed still, completely still, because I recognized the look in Ethan's eyes. I had seen it at 14 when he pushed me into the kitchen counter hard enough to bruise my ribs. At 16 when he grabbed my wrist and twisted until something cracked. At 18 when he told me I would never matter to anyone. Now that same rage had nowhere to hide. It consumed what little self-control he had left. You made me look like a fool. His voice dropped into something low and dangerous. And now everybody sees you for what you are. A liar, a fraud, a disgrace. The moment cracked. He lunged. It was fast. Faster than most people expected from someone unraveling. But not faster than someone trained to survive ambushes in Syria. I didn't flinch. The MPs did. 2 MPs surged forward, intercepting him just inches before he reached me. They grabbed his arms, locking them behind his back with practiced precision. Ethan thrashed like a trapped animal, his boots scraping against the floor. Let go of me. Let go. She is lying. She is lying. His scream echoed across the dining hall, raw and broken. Ramsey looked away. A couple of younger soldiers flinched as if witnessing a car crash in slow motion. General Trent's face froze into something colder than steel. Lieutenant Lockhart, stand down now, Weaver commanded. Ethan jerked violently and spit back. She is not my superior. She is not my anything. He strained against the MPs with enough force to turn his face red. This is a trick. This is some kind of manipulation. She has always been a snake. Always. My pulse stayed steady, my breathing measured. 4 counts. In. Hold. Out. Hold. The same rhythm that had kept me alive in a burning convoy on a desert highway. The same rhythm that drowned out the memory of fists hitting walls beside my head. The same rhythm that replaced fear with precision. Ethan thrashed a final time before the MPs forced him to his knees. His chest heaved, his voice cracked into a desperate rasp. You cannot let her do this. You cannot let her come back and ruin everything. I stepped closer, not enough to threaten, but enough that he had to lift his eyes to look at me. When he did, something inside him faltered. Maybe it was the realization that I felt no fear. Maybe it was that for the first time in his life he was the one powerless. Or maybe it was because the look I gave him was not anger. It was the quiet recognition of someone who had survived him. Ethan, I said softly, the way you treated me then does not give you power over me now. His face twisted. Do not talk to me like you pity me. I don't pity you, I answered. I simply outgrew you. His jaw trembled. Years of dominance and control slipped through his fingers in real time. I crouched enough that our eyes were level. Every muscle in the room tensed, waiting for a blow that would not come. You hurt me for years. You controlled me for years. Today that cycle ends. His breath hitched. I held his gaze steady and calm, letting him see everything I had learned to hide. The strength, the scars, the resolve. I am not the girl you used to break. I am the woman who came back from the dead, and I will not fear you again. Ethan's body sagged, his rage drained into something hollow, something defeated, something that knew finally unmistakably that he couldn't reach me anymore. Weaver nodded at the MPs. Escort Lieutenant Lockhart to holding until he regains composure. The MPs lifted him to his feet. Ethan didn't fight this time. He only stared at me, confused, betrayed, lost. As they dragged him away, he whispered a single sentence that only I could hear. "When did you stop being afraid of me?" I straightened. The answer was simple. The day I became someone you could never hurt again. The doors closed behind him, and with that, the past I had run from for 17 years finally cracked open and began to collapse. The MPs had barely dragged Ethan out of the dining hall when General Rourke turned to me with the expression of someone shifting from public crisis to classified operations in a single breath. The doors thudded shut behind him. The echoes were still fading when she spoke. "Commander Lockhart will lead this investigation." Her tone was clean steel. No hesitation, no space for challenge. But of course, Ethan tried anyway. From the hallway, muffled but desperate, I heard him shout, "She cannot lead anything! She is my sister!" The word sister hit me harder than I expected. For a fraction of a second, the old memories rose a ghost from another life, but Rourke's answer cut clean through the rest. "She is not your sister today. She is your superior." The tone in that sentence hit the hall like a shockwave. Even the youngest soldiers straightened instinctively. Family ties had no place in this room. Command did, and she had just drawn a line that would define everything that came next. Rourke stepped closer to me, lowering her voice enough that only the generals and a few officers could hear. "Commander, you reported earlier that the intel leak originates inside SEAL Team 7. Confirm." "Yes, ma'am. Evidence indicates repeated unauthorized access originating from internal team systems. Frequency elevated in the last 90 days. Weaver folded his arms, jaw-locking. 90 days lines up with the failed coastal insertion missions, Warren added, and the compromised recon at Coronado. Trent's eyes narrowed. Whoever is leaking intel is targeting operator-level missions. That is not casual espionage. That is strategic malice. Rourke looked to me again. "You believe the leak is internal?" "Yes, ma'am. And Ethan Lockhart," I paused. "He is not the source, but he is connected to devices that have been used to move intel. He is either complicit or being used as misdirection." Trent asked, "Do you believe he knowingly participated?" I remembered the confusion in Ethan's eyes earlier, not the weaponized rage, but the small flicker of genuine shock. "I believe he is reckless, arrogant, careless with both authority and systems, but not calculating enough to run an intel pipeline." Rourke nodded once. "We will treat him as a potential pawn. Not a mastermind." Her eyes sharpened. "Find the mastermind." Weaver signaled the MPs. "Clear the dining hall. This becomes a secured scene. No phones, no recordings, no leaks." Within minutes, the hall emptied, leaving only command, a few analysts rushing in with portable consoles, and me. My cover was gone. My identity was out. Sovereign Ghost could not hide in this room anymore. And yet they all looked at me not with fear, but with expectation. Rourke motioned to the secure console they had wheeled in from the classified comms center. "Commander, begin the investigation briefing." I stepped forward as the screen illuminated and pulled up the encrypted logs I had been gathering silently for months. A digital spiderweb appeared across the display. 16 nodes. Access points over 90 days. File types. Timestamps. Transfer routes. Overlay patterns. Warren leaned in. "Someone has been busy." Rourke spoke quietly. "Commander, walk us through it." I pointed to the first cluster. "These are the earliest anomalies. Non-critical files accessed during low traffic hours. Almost invisible. Automated maintenance would not flag them." Trent nodded. "A toe in the water. Testing penetration." "Precisely." I zoomed in. But this cluster began the escalation. Tactical briefings, mission outlines, team movements, Coronado, Syria, JBLM, multiple bases. Weaver murmured. "That is too broad for a single operator." "Or someone wanted to make it look broad," I said. "Diversion. So the real data transfer would be masked behind noise." Rourke's voice grew colder. "Explain." I tapped another node. "Look here. 3 weeks ago, the pattern shifts. Access narrows to SEAL Team 7 systems only. Kelton's workstation." Warren stiffened. "Brock Kelton, the XO." "Yes, sir. His digital signature appears repeatedly in critical files." cross-referencing intelligence briefings, training schedules, and communications with an external device. Trent said external as in off-site. Off-grid. Yes, ma'am. Not Navy. Not DOD. Not government. Warren cursed under his breath. Someone built a pipeline. Someone with rank. Someone with access. Trent glanced up at me, and someone confident no one would ever check. My stomach tightened. The pattern was too clean, too deliberate, and too familiar. Rourke exhaled slowly. Commander Lockhart, your earlier assessment did not identify Kelton as the likely source. Correct, because the earliest access logs pointed to lower clearances. People like Ethan, people who could be manipulated or blamed. The room darkened under the weight of realization. Weaver growled. So Kelton used the stepbrother as a shield. Yes, sir. He knew Ethan was careless, that he often left devices unattended, that he reused passcodes, that he boasted online in unofficial team groups. All vulnerabilities Kelton exploited. Rourke's voice hardened. And the leak, the timing, the consequences, every compromised operation. I zoomed the screen out. Green lines for normal operations, yellow for suspicious, red for confirmed compromise. The map turned to crimson veins, a bleeding system. Trent whispered. My God, Warren said, that is targeted sabotage, high-value missions, operator routes, surveillance logs. Someone wanted casualties. The word casualties struck the old scar at my side like a hard breath. The convoy in Syria. The feeling of the blast wave, the metal burning, the dust choking my lungs, the pain, the voices, the silence afterward. A memory flashed so sharply my hands flexed before I forced them still. Rourke noticed. Her eyes softened only by a fraction. Continue. I steadied my breathing. 4 counts. In, hold, out, hold. Then I tapped the final cluster. And this is where everything changed. The last 36 hours. Unauthorized access into the classified sovereign layer. Trent inhaled sharply. Someone went after your program. Yes, ma'am. And only a handful of people even know Sovereign Ghost exists. That list included Rourke Weaver, 2 Pentagon directors, and Kelton's former mentor. Brock Kelton worked under your stepfather's unit 15 years ago. The room stilled. The temperature dropped. Warren said quietly, Commander, you need to explain that connection. I did not look away. My stepfather trained Kelton during early deployment rotations. Kelton idolized him. He learned his tactics, his philosophy, his ruthlessness. He learned to hide behind louder men while pulling strings in the dark. Trent added, and your stepfather's attitude toward you. Disdain, violence, manipulation. Kelton knew the history. He used it. The emotions in my chest tightened. Kelton had watched me grow up in that toxic house, had seen the imbalance, had seen how easy it would be to use Ethan as a pawn. Weaver's voice cut in. Is there any indication Kelton was involved in the attack that led to your KIA designation? I paused. Then I opened a file I had not intended to share today, but truth did not care about timing. I presented the image. A blurry silhouette on a rooftop in Syria, recorded by a surveillance drone moments before the blast. The figure holding something, a small box. A transmitter. Or worse. Rourke stiffened. Has this been confirmed? No, ma'am, but the coordinates align with Kelton's unofficial travel logs, and the timing matches convoy interception. Warren swore under his breath. This goes deeper than a base leak. Trent whispered. This is betrayal at operational command level. Rourke nodded once. Then we take this seriously. This investigation moves under sovereign authority. Commander Lockhart, you will lead. Weaver stepped closer, and you will have full access to Team 7's spaces, their gear, their comms, every workstation, every device. No clearance denied. Warren added, we will pull Kelton in when we have enough to bind his hands so tightly he cannot slip out. Trent looked toward the hallway where Ethan had been taken. But what about the lieutenant? I answered. He remains under custody until we assess his involvement, but he is not the mastermind. Weaver said he will feel the consequences, but not the punishment meant for Kelton. Rourke looked directly into my eyes. Commander, I need you to walk into the belly of the team that humiliated you since the moment you arrived here. They will fear you now. They will resist. They will try to hide things. I ask you plainly, can you lead this without personal history interfering? The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Memories crashed behind my eyes. Ethan slamming doors. Ethan laughing at bruises. Ethan pretending loyalty while pushing me downstairs. Kelton watching silently during those years, calculating even then. The convoy explosion. My body broken. My name carved into a headstone. My mother weeping at a funeral I could not attend. And the man who caused all of it, sitting somewhere on this base acting innocent. I stood straighter. My voice was quiet, firm, unshakable. This is not personal. This is justice. Rourke nodded once decisive. Then the investigation begins now. The room shifted into motion at once. Analysts plugging in equipment, officers locking down networks, MPs securing halls, a base readying for internal war. Weaver gestured toward the exit. Commander Team 7's offices await. You have the authority, you have the clearance, and you have the history that makes you the only person for this job. I exhaled once. Controlled, precise, ready. Then I stepped toward the doors, toward the truth, waiting on the other side, toward the ghosts that had been haunting my life for far too long. And behind me, I heard Rourke say quietly to the others, if anyone can dismantle this, it is her, because she has nothing left to fear. I walked out of the secured dining hall flanked by 2 military police officers, the kind of escort that drew silent stares from every soldier in the corridor. Word spread through a base faster than wildfire, and I could feel it now, a quiet hum in the air as personnel moved aside, some with curiosity, some with unease, and some with dawning recognition. The sovereign ghost insignia Rourke revealed had already begun reshaping the way people held themselves when I passed. That shift in posture was familiar. It happened in combat zones when someone realized the person next to them was not what they seemed. Weaver's voice echoed from behind as he approached, falling into step beside me. Commander, you understand the stakes. We find the leak, we stop the damage. Yes, sir, and you understand that Team 7 will not be welcoming. I met his gaze. They do not have to welcome me. They only have to comply. Weaver almost smiled. Good, because compliance is the only thing I expect right now. MPs opened the doors leading toward the seal wing, a section of the base protected by 2 reinforced checkpoints and a biometric lock. Only authorized personnel entered this space, and now I had more authorization than anyone inside. The first checkpoint guard recognized Weaver instantly and snapped to attention. Sir, at ease. Clear us through. The guard scanned his badge, then mine. The moment my sovereign clearance flashed across the screen, he froze. Ma'am. I nodded once. Proceed. The second checkpoint was manned by 2 MPs whose eyes widened slightly when they saw me, then snapped back to rigid professionalism. They unlocked the blast door, revealing the corridor that led toward SEAL Team 7's operations bullpen, one of the most elite, tightly controlled rooms on base. A space no civilian contractor would ever be allowed near. Until now. The air inside smelled faintly of coffee gun oil and the stubborn pride of elite warriors. A cluster of operators stood near the tactical prep tables, their voices low but tense. The moment I stepped inside, silence washed over the room like a cold wave. I felt their eyes on my back, their confusion, their skepticism, their bruised egos. And beneath it all, something else. Fear. Even if they would never admit it. Weaver spoke first, his tone crisp and official. SEAL Team 7 front and center. The operators moved into formation, some reluctantly, some resentfully, but all obeying. That was the nature of military hierarchy. Then Weaver stepped aside and left the floor to me. Gentlemen, I said. My voice was calm, but carried honed by briefing rooms and battlefields. You are aware that an intelligence leak has compromised multiple missions tied to your team. Stiff postures, tight jaws, glances exchanged. None spoke. I continued. From this point forward, the investigation is under sovereign authority. You will cooperate fully. No exceptions, no delays, no omissions. A younger SEAL, barely 30, muttered under his breath. Sovereign my ass! I turned my head toward him slowly, and his face blanched. Weaver's voice cut like a blade. "You want to say that again, petty officer?" The SEAL snapped upright. "No, sir. That is what I thought." I motioned to the MPs. "Begin sweep. Every workstation, every device, every locker, every gear bin. If it exists in this room, we audit it." MPs surged forward with scanning tools and portable forensic kits. Operators stiffened as their personal and team gear was opened, logged, photographed, sealed. The tension was thick enough to slice. I moved through the room with precision scanning screens, checking timestamps, noting unusual cable setups. Then I saw it. A small black box tucked behind a tactical monitor stack, barely visible unless someone knew what they were looking for. Wrong shape, wrong manufacturer, wrong labeling. I crouched, reached behind the equipment, and pulled it out. A communication relay, the kind not issued by the military. Unauthorized, unregistered, with encrypted retransmit capability. The room shifted. Several SEALs inhaled sharply. One cursed under his breath. Weaver stepped up beside me. "That is not standard issue." "No, sir. And it has been powered recently." I turned the device over. Tiny scratches marked the casing fingerprints smudged along the edges. Someone had used this often. Someone confident enough to hide it in plain sight. I handed it to an MP. "Have tech analyze this immediately. Cross-reference with the transfer logs. If this device carried data across unsecured channels, we will know." The MP nodded and rushed the device out of the room. A tense quiet settled over the operators, and I could feel the shift. Denial was dissolving. Fear was blooming. Someone in this very room had committed treason. Someone they had trusted. I pulled up the digital logs on my tablet, cross-referencing with the timestamps I already collected. My breath stilled. A pattern emerged. A pattern that made my chest tighten. Ethan's badge ID had been used to access several of the compromised systems. Not once, multiple times, during late-night hours, during unauthorized time windows. Logs do not lie, but motives did. Weaver stepped closer, reading over my shoulder. And there it is. Ethan's access. It was not malice. It was stupidity, negligence, carelessness. But in the military, those things killed just as effectively as betrayal. A voice cracked behind me. I did not know. I swear I did not know. Ethan stood in the doorway, hands cuffed in front of him, escorted by MPs. His face was drained of color, his jaw trembling. The operators turned to him, some shocked, some angry, some simply disappointed. Ethan's eyes darted between me and the logs. "That is not possible. I never accessed those files. I never touched those terminals." I nodded slowly. "No, but you left your badge unattended." His breath froze. "The night of the Coronado briefing, you left your ID in the locker room for 17 minutes, your workstation unlocked, your comms unsecured." Ethan blinked rapidly, shaking his head as if he could will the truth away. "Someone else must have used it. Someone else had to have." "That is exactly what happened. I turned my tablet so the team could see. And now we know who." A hush fell as I zoomed into the authorization trail. Kelton. His name appeared like a stain spreading across the screen. Kelton used Ethan's credentials multiple times. Kelton accessed your logs. Kelton executed the transfer. Kelton set the pipeline. Kelton disguised his signature under Ethan's badge. Ethan stumbled back. "I did not know. I swear I did not know." The desperation in his voice cracked something old in me, memories of him shouting similar words after hurting me as a kid, insisting he never meant it, never realized, never intended. But this time the room decided his fate. A senior SEAL barked, "You idiot! Your negligence endangered the entire team." Another hissed, "What were you thinking leaving your ID out in the open?" Ethan looked like he might collapse. I stepped forward. Ignorance does not absolve liability. His eyes snapped to mine raw, pleading. "Please, Marin, you have to believe me." For a heartbeat, the old instinct rose in my chest, the instinct to shrink, to smooth over conflict, to survive him. But that girl was gone. This was truth command and justice. I held his gaze steady. This investigation is not about belief. It is about evidence. And the evidence shows your carelessness made this possible. His breath shuddered. So I am to blame. You are responsible, I said quietly. But you are not the architect. For the first time, he truly understood. His shoulders sagged. His voice broke. What happens to me? Weaver answered before I could. That depends on how much more you have not told us. MPs take him to holding. Ethan tried to step toward me, but the MPs held him firmly. His voice cracked again. Marin, please, do not let them end my career. Do not let them destroy everything. I met his eyes one last time. Choices have consequences, and you made yours long before today. His face crumpled. The MPs pulled him away. The door thudded shut. The room remained silent. No one stepped forward to defend him. Not one SEAL. Not one man from the team he worshipped. Weaver turned to me with a grim nod. You handled that well. I exhaled slowly. This is not finished. No, he agreed. Now we take down Kelton. The operators lowered their heads, preparing for the reckoning they all knew was coming, and I walked deeper into the room toward Kelton's desk, toward the enemy who had taken everything from me and who now believed himself untouchable. He was wrong. The evidence told a different story, and this time the ghosts were coming for him. They placed Ethan in interview room 3, a soundproof box with a single table bolted to the floor and a strip of fluorescent light that hummed with an annoying flicker. Most soldiers hated these rooms. Too sterile, too quiet, too honest. I stood outside the door for a full 10 seconds before entering, letting the silence settle around me, letting the weight of the past sharpen instead of cloud my thoughts. When I finally opened the door, Ethan looked up with a jerk. His wrists were uncuffed, but 2 MPs stood by the back wall in case he tried anything stupid. He would not. Not anymore. The moment his eyes met mine, something inside him crumpled. He was pale, shaking the bravado stripped clean. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a man watching everything he built crack beneath his feet. The MPs stepped out, leaving us alone. The door closed with a heavy thud. The room swallowed the sound. Ethan swallowed hard. Marin. His voice cracked. Can you sit? Please. I remained standing. The silence stretched until he dropped his gaze. His hands twisted together like he was trying to wring the guilt out of his skin. He spoke first. I did not know he was using my badge. I swear I did not know. They told me you died. They said you were gone. I thought the funeral was real. I thought the casket was real. I thought losing you was real. His voice climbed higher with each word like panic riding his breath. I waited until he ran out of things to say. He finally whispered, I am not lying. I know. His head jerked up at that. For one heartbeat, hope flickered in his eyes. Foolish, unfounded, dangerous hope, but I did not let it linger. Knowing does not excuse the consequences. Ethan flinched like I had struck him. I continued. Ignorance does not erase liability. His mouth fell open slightly. You sound like them. Like command. Like someone reading from a script. I shook my head. This is not a script. This is truth. He pushed a hand through his hair, pacing a few short steps before his knees gave out and he sank into the chair. I never meant to hurt the team. I never meant to put anyone in danger. He swallowed hard. I trusted Kelton. I thought he was on my side. I thought he had my back. I almost laughed at the irony. That is how manipulation works. The people you trust are the ones who cut the deepest. Ethan froze. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. He knew I was not just talking about him. He hesitated before whispering, Did I cut deep? I met his gaze without blinking. Yes. Ethan flinched again and looked away. He rubbed his hands over his face. Everything is falling apart. They are going to destroy my career. They are going to take everything. His breathing grew ragged. And you are the only one who can stop it. I watched him carefully. And why would I do that? Because... His voice cracked completely. Because you are still my sister. The word sister hung in the air like a fracture splitting open. Once that word meant something to me. Once before the bruises, before the hatred, before the years of being treated as less as nothing, as someone to mock or ignore. Now it was an empty label, a title used only when convenient. Ethan stood slowly, palms up like someone approaching a wild animal. I know I hurt you. I know I did things I should not have done. I know I treated you like... He swallowed tightly, like you were beneath me. But I was a kid. I was stupid. I was copying him. Him. He would not say our stepfather's name. He never did, as if avoiding the word would erase what he had done. I did not let him dance around it. You copied his violence, his control, his favoritism. You copied everything he did to me and used it as your template. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I should have protected you. I should have stood up for you. I should have been your brother. I waited. He exhaled shakily. I cannot undo any of it. But please, please do not let them end my life in uniform. You have power now. You have rank. You have their ear. You can stop this. Please, help me. For a moment, he looked like a drowning man reaching for the only rope left in the storm. His voice dropped to a whisper that scraped against every old scar inside me. Can you protect me? Please. You are still my sister. The room went very still. A long time ago, those words might have broken me. Now they clarified me. Slowly, without hurry, I stepped closer until I stood in front of him. He lifted his head, eyes red, waiting for mercy that would not come. I spoke quietly, calmly, firmly. You stopped being my family the day you helped them hurt me. He froze. Every muscle in his face tightened. His breath stopped, and for the first time in his life, he understood something he had never let himself believe. He had lost me long before today. His voice cracked. Marin, please. One more chance. Just one. I shook my head once, not in anger, not in vengeance, in truth. You want forgiveness without accountability. You want rescue without responsibility. You want comfort without consequences. That is not how justice works. Tears filled his eyes then. Real ones, the kind he had never shown me as kids. He whispered, I am not strong enough for this. I do not know how to fix it. I do not know how to fix me. I let out a slow breath. Then face what you broke. Learn from what you destroyed. And accept the consequences of what you allowed. He swayed, absorbing the words like blows. I turned toward the door. His voice, small and broken, followed me. Will you ever forgive me? I stopped with my hand on the door handle, but did not turn around. Forgiveness is not owed. It is earned. Then I opened the door. The MPs straightened. Ethan whispered something too faint for them to hear, but sharp enough for me to register. I miss when you needed me. I paused only long enough to answer without looking back. I never needed you. The door closed between us with a final solid click. A barrier. A boundary. A burial. Behind it, his sobs broke loose. Behind it, years of imbalance began to collapse. Behind it, the cycle of control that defined my childhood shut down for good. I walked away without hesitation, without guilt, without looking over my shoulder. Some people lose their second chance the moment they misuse their first. And Ethan Lockhart had been misusing his for years. The walk out of the interrogation wing felt unnaturally long, as if each fluorescent light above me wanted to drag me backward into memories I had spent years burying under discipline and rank. Every corridor at JBLM looked clean, controlled, fortified, but the past had a way of seeping through steel and concrete. By the time I reached the end of the hallway, the truth I had spent years outrunning pressed in behind my ribs, like an old fracture aching before a storm. I kept walking until the bass noise faded and the echo of my boots became the only sound. That was when the memories finally forced their way to the surface one after another, uninvited and unwelcome. I remembered the first time my stepfather hit me. I was 13. It was late, well past dinner, and Ethan had knocked over a glass of juice during one of his tantrums. He pointed at me without hesitation and said I did it. My mother believed him instantly, or pretended to, because believing anything else required effort she never gave me. My stepfather walked into the kitchen face red with irritation and grabbed my wrist so hard I heard the pop before I felt the pain. He shoved me against the wall. I said it was not me. I said it again and again. It did not matter. He slapped me across the face with a force that sent stars blooming behind my eyes. And when I looked up through the blur, Ethan was standing 3 feet away, watching, silent, curious, not horrified, not protective, just entertained. That moment shaped something in him and something in me, something neither of us fully understood until now. I kept walking as the memories piled on, forming a long, unbroken chain of moments I once tried to forget. My mother always looked away, always smoothed her hair, straightened her blouse, and said things like, "He is just stressed," or "Do not provoke him," or "It is your fault for being so difficult." The first time she saw the bruise shaped like his hand on my shoulder, she made me wear long sleeves and told me family stayed quiet about family matters. The phrase family matters had become a slow poison in my bloodstream long before I learned the word trauma. Ethan, meanwhile, became the golden child, the chosen one, the boy who could do no wrong. He got extra helpings at dinner. He got his own room while I shared mine with boxes no one bothered to say were storage and not symbolic. He received praise for chores he never did. And every time he shoved me, every time he mocked me, every time his words dripped with disdain, my mother would murmur, "He is just sensitive. Let it go." It built a hierarchy so sharp I sometimes felt like I walked barefoot on a ladder made of broken glass. The deeper truth, the one I never voiced until now, was that Ethan learned dominance from the man who should have protected both of us. He learned that my pain helped him climb, and I learned that no one was coming to save me. No one was going to step between me and the violence in that house. It was the night before my 17th birthday when my stepfather cornered me in the hallway. He had been drinking. His voice was thick with anger at something that had nothing to do with me, but in that house, nothing needed to make sense. He shoved me against the wall and said with a drunken sneer, "You will never outrank anyone, not a soul, not a brother, not a man. You were born to serve people better than you." I felt something heavy settle in my stomach that night, something final, something sharp. That sentence carved itself into me like a wound that refused to clot. I remember lying awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe quietly around me, thinking that if I stayed one more year, I would disappear into myself completely. So I left. The moment I turned 18, I walked into a recruitment office in downtown Tacoma and signed the papers. The recruiter asked why I wanted to join. I lied at first. I said I wanted structure, pride, duty. He nodded, satisfied. But the real truth, the one I dared not say out loud, was simpler. I joined the military to survive my family. I joined because it was the only place where rank was earned, not assigned by abuse. I joined because the battlefield made more sense than my own living room. I joined to protect myself from people who claimed to love me. Training carved me into someone the old house could never break again. I learned to fight, to think under pressure, to hide my emotions so completely that even seasoned officers could not read me. And eventually the people in Washington noticed. They pulled me deeper, into black ops, into intelligence, into the shadows where names did not matter, but results did. By the time JSOC recruited me into the Sovereign Ghost program, the old life felt like a story that happened to another girl entirely. The military declared me dead 2 years later, and for a moment, that felt right. It meant cutting the last thread tying me to the people who never wanted me whole. But standing in that dining hall hours earlier, watching 4 generals step toward me as one, hearing the scrape of their boots and the silence that followed, felt like the universe stitching something closed. 4 generals, 4 stars each, 4 salutes delivered with reverence so heavy it pressed into every pair of lungs in that room, 4 undeniable acknowledgments of my existence, rank, and worth. And Ethan saw all of it. I replayed his face in my mind, the mixture of shock and disbelief and fear. He had mocked me minutes earlier. He had tried to push me down again, just like he always did. And then the most powerful military leaders in the Pacific bowed to me. The moment he whispered, "What, Commander, was not confusion? It was the collapse of a lifetime of lies he had been fed." I reached the far end of the corridor and leaned lightly against the wall, letting the memories finish their march. I remembered my mother's voice at my fake funeral service, trembling, forced. She had not cried for me. She cried for the image she lost, the perfect family she pretended to have. The golden boy she protected was now spiraling, and she still would not see the line between love and enabling. I remembered my stepfather ignoring the folded flag the officer handed him, mumbling something about mistakes being inevitable. He had not asked how I died. He had not asked why. And of course, he had not asked who else died that day. He only asked if the funeral could be brief because he had work in the morning. The truth hit me so abruptly, I exhaled without realizing. I did not lose a family. I escaped one. Every step I had taken since enlisting, every scar I had earned in training, every mission that almost killed me, every moment I stood alone in hostile terrain, every breath I stole back from death, all of it carried me to the moment in that dining hall where 4 generals looked at me and saw someone worth saluting. And Ethan, the boy who laughed when I fell, watched the entire world reorder itself around me. I pushed off the wall and straightened. For 17 years, I believed I had to outrun the past. Now I realized I had outranked it, and when 4 generals saluted me, the circle finally closed. The news of Ethan's suspension spread across JBLM faster than weather alerts. By mid-afternoon, every operator, analyst, and mechanic on base had heard that Lieutenant Ethan Lockhart had been officially relieved of duty pending a full investigation. The military had a habit of moving quickly when someone endangered national security, and the announcement hit with the cold precision of a blade. I saw the shift happen from a distance almost clinically, as if I were watching a slow motion unraveling through reinforced glass. The SEALs who used to laugh with him in the gym, who slapped his back after drills, who bragged alongside him about missions none of them were supposed to discuss, now treated him like a contagion. Conversations stopped when he approached. Stares lingered too long. Shoulders turned. Boots pivoted away. The tight fraternity of special operations had no tolerance for weakness and even less for liabilities. And Ethan had become both. The first crack in him appeared that same evening outside the SEAL locker bay. I watched from across the corridor as he approached a group from Team 7, men he once considered brothers. They did not even pretend to hide their disdain. One of them muttered something sharp under his breath. Ethan took a step closer, defensive. The SEAL held up a hand. "Stay away from us, man. You are radioactive. We are not going down with you." The words hit him harder than any blow I had ever seen him take. He stood frozen as the group walked off toward the training cage, leaving him alone in a hallway that suddenly felt too wide, too bright, too empty. He looked around as if searching for someone to contradict what he just heard. No one did. By late evening, his anger began to bloom. Real, pulsing anger, the kind that had powered him since childhood. The kind that used to be aimed at me. The kind he no longer had permission to hide behind. I found him hours later outside the barracks, pacing like a trapped animal, a half-empty bottle clutched in his hand. His uniform shirt was untucked, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild with humiliation. When he finally noticed me standing at a distance, his body stiffened, his voice slurred but sharp. "Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted?" He took a swaying step toward me. "They are treating me like I am dirt because of you." I said nothing. Silence was a scalpel. He kept talking, desperate to fill the void. "You could have helped me. You could have told them it was not my fault. You could have said something. Anything." He lifted the bottle as if to emphasize his point. "Instead, you just stood there and let them rip my life apart." I watched him quietly. His grip tightened, his voice cracked. "Why? After everything? Why?" The answer was simple but not easy. Because accountability is not cruelty. Accountability is justice. He shuddered at the word justice as if it burned his skin. He tossed the bottle against the wall, shattering glass across the concrete. The MPs down the path turned sharply, hands already on their belts. but I lifted a hand slightly to signal them to stay back. Ethan was spiraling, but not enough to threaten me. Not anymore. He was collapsing inward, not outward. The next day, his downward slide accelerated. Word came from command that Kelton would be interviewed soon, and Ethan understood what that meant. If Kelton fell, Ethan was going with him on negligence charges. He was not built to handle consequences. He had grown up in a house where consequences were mine and praise was his. Now the world flipped its axis and he could not find his footing. Soldiers reported seeing him stumbling out of the on-base liquor store with more bottles than regulations allowed. Later, he was spotted at the gym trying to lift far beyond what his arms could manage, dropping weights in frustration when they shook under pressure. By afternoon, he punched a locker hard enough to split his knuckles. I saw the blood when he stormed past me in the corridor. His glare sliced toward me. "This is your fault. You turned them against me. You destroyed everything." I stood still, letting the storm rage around me. His breathing hitched. I was supposed to be the one they respected, the one they followed. Not you. Not someone like you. Someone like me. A phantom from his childhood. The girl he remembered being shoved aside so he could shine. The one he believed would never outrank him. I walked past him slowly, calm, controlled, unshaken. That alone seemed to trigger something dark. He punched the wall behind me, not hitting me, not daring to, but needing violence to fill the space where his arrogance used to live. I did not turn around. I did not acknowledge him. I did not need to. That was the thing with breakdowns. They fed on attention. They starved on silence. The next morning, he showed up outside the administrative building at dawn, eyes sunken, jaw clenched. He waited for Team 7 to assemble for a briefing he was no longer allowed to attend. When they ignored him, he snapped. I heard the yelling from halfway across the parade ground. "You cowards! All of you! You think you know loyalty. You think you know what it means to fight. You don't know anything!" Not one operator turned to face him. Not one! They walked past like he was air. He screamed after them until his voice broke. When he finally saw me watching from the steps of the building, he laughed. A broken, bitter sound that did not belong to the man he used to be. He pointed at me, his voice a coarse whisper. "You did this. You humiliated me in front of them, in front of the generals, in front of the entire base. You made them look at you like you were someone. You made them look at me like I was nothing." His hands shook violently. I could see the trembling in his shoulders. For a moment, he looked like a child again. But I did not move toward him. I did not comfort him. I was not his shield. I was not his keeper. That job had never been mine. He sank to the curb elbows on his knees, head in his hands, whispering something over and over. I could not hear the words, but I recognized the rhythm. A mantra. A desperate attempt to hold on to something familiar while everything else slipped away. At noon, he made his worst attempt at reclaiming control. He showed up drunk at the Team 7 ready room, demanding access, demanding respect, demanding someone look at him the way they used to. The SEALs refused. MPs escorted him out calm but firm. Ethan did not fight them, not physically, but he hurled words like grenades, traitors, hypocrites, weaklings. His voice carried down the hall, desperate and ragged. It took me a moment to realize he was not talking to them. He was talking to himself. That evening, I watched from across the courtyard as he sat alone on a bench, staring blankly at the ground. His uniform was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, his sense of superiority dissolved. When he finally spoke, his voice drifted on the wind. "I do not know who I am without being better than her." That sentence landed inside me like a whisper of an old wound. It explained everything. Every shove, every insult, every cruel laugh, every time he looked at me and saw not a sister, but a threat to his imagined throne. He needed to be above me to feel whole. Now he was not. Now he never would be again. I stood quietly in the shadow of the building, observing, present, detached. He never saw me watching, and I never stepped in. Because some lessons have to be learned in silence. Some consequences have to burn on their own. And some men only begin to change when the world finally stops cushioning the fall. Ethan Lockhart was breaking, but breaking was not the same as healing, and healing was not my responsibility. By the time the sun slipped behind the Cascades and evening shadows stretched long across JBLM, the base had begun to settle into its usual rhythm. Distant training drills tapering off trucks, rumbling toward motor pools, aircraft humming along the edges of the airfield. But underneath the surface, tension ran like an undercurrent electrical volatile waiting for a spark. Because the truth was closing in, and the truth had a name: Lieutenant Commander Brock Kelton. I stood inside the intelligence fusion room, a secured chamber where analysts worked in silence under low-light screens reflecting off their faces like cold blue ghosts. This was where patterns revealed themselves, where lies unraveled, where the real enemy always showed their hand. When the door sealed behind me with a hydraulic hiss, Chief Warrant Officer Ramsey stepped forward. His face was tight, his jaw squared in a way that told me he had something grim in hand. "Commander Lockhart," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We've finished cross-referencing the device you pulled from the SEAL bay. The unauthorized relay. The one hidden behind Kelton's monitor stack." I braced myself. "Show me." Ramsey nodded to an analyst who uploaded the decrypted logs onto the main screen. What appeared made my chest tighten not with surprise, but with confirmation. Transfer logs, external routing codes, hidden encryption layers, patterns that no one without specialized training could mimic, and all of them linked directly to Kelton's access credentials. Ramsey exhaled slowly. He is not covering his tracks. He is burying them under someone else's, someone he thought no one would question. Ethan, Ramsey nodded. He wanted a fall guy, someone naive, someone sloppy, someone who bragged enough to draw attention away from himself, someone whose carelessness he could weaponize. I felt heat rise beneath my collarbone, not anger, but recognition. This was not new. Kelton had spent years learning the same tactics from the man who raised him in the field, the same man who raised Ethan and me in that toxic house, my stepfather. Kelton grew up under his mentorship during early deployments. I could hear the echoes of that revelation in my own voice. He learned his methods. He learned how to manipulate the weakest link. He learned how to hide behind louder men. Ramsey frowned, and he learned how to make someone like Ethan take the blame for his sins. Yes, he did. The analyst continued cycling through files until an image from earlier that week appeared. Kelton walking past Ethan's workstation at 0200 logged on for less than 10 minutes. Ethan nowhere in sight. Then another image, Kelton entering the comms room alone, bypassing normal procedures, using override codes he should not have had access to, and more encrypted timestamps matching the exact moments mission intel had been leaked to offshore servers. Ramsey crossed his arms. This is no longer internal negligence. This is deliberate compromise, coordinated, systematic, highly informed. He paused, his tone darkening. Someone trained him. Someone built him for this. Someone who knew exactly how to use a soldier's ego as a weapon. My jaw tightened. My stepfather's voice echoed in my mind, cruel and cold. People like Ethan will always follow orders. They are loyal to hierarchy, not truth. Loyalty, blind and damaging, a perfect weakness. And Kelton exploited it. I turned back to the screen. Bring up the personnel cross-history. The analyst typed quickly. A timeline appeared. Kelton and my stepfather served 2 overlapping rotations during classified coastal interdiction operations 15 years earlier, reporting to the same command director. They had shared multiple deployments, shared quarters, shared missions, shared mentality. The pieces clicked together like a lock turning. Kelton had modeled himself after the only leader he ever admired, a man who built obedience through cruelty and hid wrongdoing behind the silence of those too afraid to challenge him. A man who once looked at me and said I would never outrank anyone. And now Kelton's arrogance mirrored that same contempt. Ramsey cleared his throat. There is more. The analyst pulled up a restricted image the silhouette captured during the Syria ambush. The rooftop figure holding a transmitter seconds before the convoy exploded and the world declared me dead. I stepped closer. The image was blurred, grainy, distorted by heat waves, but the tilt of the head, the stance, the broadness of the shoulders, it matched Kelton's physical build. Match probability 52%, the analyst said. Too low for court-martial certainty, but too high to ignore. I stared at it for a long moment. Kelton knew I survived. He tried to access my Sovereign Ghost record. He tried to erase traces of that incident, which meant only one thing. He was not just covering his tracks. He was protecting the identity of the person who helped orchestrate that ambush. Someone higher. Someone who taught him everything. My stepfather. My voice was steady, but something cold tightened inside me. Ramsey crossed his arms again. Do you think Kelton was involved directly? I took a breath. The Sovereign convoy ambush was professional, coordinated. Someone inside gave them our movements. Kelton had access to movement logs and motive. Ramsey nodded grimly. If Kelton helped set the trap, it would explain why he tried to bury your KIA file, and why he is desperate to remove any trace of you now, because if I resurfaced, if someone saw me alive, everything he built would collapse, just as it was collapsing now. Weaver broke through the doorway, expression severe. Commander, we need your assessment. Do you believe Kelton intended for Ethan to take the fall from the beginning? Yes. And do you believe he manipulated Ethan's weaknesses? Absolutely. And do you believe he is connected to the convoy attack that led to your KIA designation? The air felt heavy. Electric. Raw. Yes. Weaver's jaw clenched. Then we bring him in. I shook my head. No. The room paused. I stepped back from the screen, my mind aligning pieces with surgical precision. If we confront him without airtight evidence, he will deny it. He will request counsel. He will stall until he destroys everything on his devices. Weaver frowned. He will panic. Exactly. And panic makes sloppy men expose themselves. I turned to Ramsey. Pull every access log he touched in the last 48 hours. If he knows we are onto him, he will try to delete something. That is what we need. A digital red-handed moment. Weaver looked at me with something between respect and caution. You have a very specific profile on this man. Yes, I do, because I have seen him before, in my childhood, in my stepfather. Kelton is a predator who hides behind authority, and he will do exactly what they always do when cornered. Try to erase the evidence that damns him. Ramsey nodded to the analysts. You heard the commander. Track everything. Every packet, every keystroke, every access request, and prepare for him to run scared. Within minutes, the room erupted into quiet urgency. Screens flickered with streams of code. Lines of data flowed like rivers. Alerts pinged as analysts prepared a digital trap. I turned toward the door. Weaver followed. You are ready for this. I nodded once. I was born ready for this, sir. The corridor outside hummed with energy. Somewhere across the base, Kelton still believed he held control. He still believed he could twist the truth. Still believed he could hide behind Ethan. Still believed he could bury his sins. But he was wrong, because I had spent my entire life learning how predators behaved. And now I was hunting one. For the first time since the day a convoy exploded under me, I felt a clarity so sharp it bordered on calm. Kelton was the real enemy. Ethan was a pawn. My stepfather was the architect, and I was the reckoning they never saw coming. The order came at 0900 the next morning. Not whispered, not subtle. Delivered with full military clarity through secured channels. All senior personnel and SEAL Team 7 will assemble on the main parade ground at 0930 for a formal announcement by General Caroline Rourke. When something like that is announced without warning, people feel it. The air on JBLM shifted as soldiers hurried across the base boots, striking asphalt with purpose. Conversations turned into murmurs. Operators exchanged looks that said more than words ever could. A public assembly meant something big, something seismic. Something no one could hide from, especially not the guilty. I stood beside Weaver and Trent on the raised command platform overlooking the entire formation area. The morning sun hung low behind scattered clouds, casting long stripes of light across the field. Rows and rows of service members fell into formation. Dozens of units, hundreds of soldiers. The hum of anticipation built like pressure under steel. Kelton walked into the formation with SEAL Team 7 chin, lifted expression firm, the perfect image of an XO who believed his rank and reputation shielded him from any storm. But when his eyes briefly landed on me, standing on the command platform, no longer a civilian contractor, no longer dead, something flickered across his face. Not fear, not yet, but unease. The first crack. Behind him, Ethan stood at the far edge of his restricted section guarded by 2 MPs. His uniform was rumpled, his posture subdued, his eyes hollow from a night with no sleep. When he saw me, something in his expression shifted confusion, shame, and something like dawning clarity. General Rourke stepped forward. The field snapped to silent attention. Her voice carried across the wide expanse with the kind of authority only decades of service could produce. Personnel of Joint Base Lewis McChord, we have initiated a high-level investigation into the security breaches that compromised multiple operations connected to SEAL Team 7. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. She continued. Evidence has confirmed that these breaches were not accidental or external. They were deliberate, calculated, internal. Every muscle on the field tensed. Kelton's jaw tightened ever so slightly. Rourke lifted a hand and I stepped forward. The moment my boots met the front edge of the platform, silence sharpened. Most people on the field had learned my true rank only through rumor the previous day. Now they saw it for themselves. Commander Marin Lockhart will present the findings of the investigation. My voice remained steady as I activated the portable holographic display. Rows of faces watched rapt as logs, timestamps, network maps, and access credentials lit up the air. The truth unfolded in clean, unforgiving lines. Unauthorized access originating from SEAL Team 7 systems. Multiple breaches, routing through offsite servers, concealed timestamps, and finally, the signature embedded deep in the relay device we recovered. Lieutenant Commander Brock Kelton. A sound rose across the formations, not loud but collective, a stunned inhalation from over 1,000 lungs. Kelton's face drained of color. I kept going. These breaches were disguised by redirecting activity through Lieutenant Ethan Lockhart's badge ID during Windows when his workstation was left unattended. Kelton's head whipped toward Ethan, fury flaring. Ethan flinched violently, realization breaking over him like a wave. He understood. In an instant, he understood everything. Kelton used him, manipulated him, set him up as a scapegoat. I continued my tone even. The evidence shows that Ethan Lockhart's credentials were used without his knowledge. Though his negligence created opportunity, he was not the architect of the leak. Ethan closed his eyes, a tremor running through him, the truth finally cracking his denial. Kelton stared forward, rigid, refusing to look at him. I stepped aside as Rourke took the position of authority once more. Lieutenant Commander Brock Kelton, step forward. Kelton hesitated. Just 1 second, but 1 second too long. That hesitation told the entire field everything they needed to know. MPs started forward. Rourke's voice hardened into steel. That is an order! Kelton marched to the front of the SEAL formation, his jaw clenched so hard it trembled. Rourke spoke clearly, her words echoing like a gavel strike. You are hereby charged with willful violation of national security protocols, unauthorized dissemination of classified intelligence, manipulation of military personnel, obstruction of investigation, dereliction of duty, and conduct unbecoming of an officer. Every accusation struck the field like thunder. Kelton tried to speak. General Rourke, if I may respond. Rourke cut him off with an upraised hand. You may not. Lieutenant Commander Brock Kelton, you are relieved of duty, effective immediately. MPs take him into custody. The 2 military police officers moved as one, stepping in from each side. Kelton reacted on instinct, stepping back, voice cracking. Wait, this is a mistake. I want counsel. I want... His words were swallowed as the MPs seized his arms, pulling them behind his back and locking restraints onto his wrists with a metallic snap that echoed unnaturally loud across the parade ground. Every soldier watched. Every pair of eyes bore witness. The humiliation was complete, undeniable, irreversible. Kelton shouted again, now shaking with panic. "You cannot do this. I did what I was told. I did what I had to." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "And who told you?" Kelton's mouth snapped shut. That silence was damning enough to seal his fate. MPs began escorting him away. The man who believed himself untouchable now stumbled as he was dragged across the asphalt. When he passed Ethan, something primal twisted in Ethan's face, a mixture of revulsion and disbelief. His voice cracked. "You used me." Kelton didn't answer. Couldn't. He was too busy grappling with the collapse of the world he thought he controlled. As the MPs pulled him past the platform, Kelton lifted his head and met my eyes with a hatred that barely masked his terror. "This is not over." I stared back steadily. "No, Kelton. It is exactly over." The MPs dragged him away. The base was silent. Completely silent. The kind of silence that holds the weight of consequences. Rourke broke it with one final declaration. "Let this serve as a reminder. Rank does not protect the corrupt. Authority does not shield the guilty. And loyalty to the uniform means nothing without loyalty to the truth." The formation snapped to attention. Dispersal orders were given. Slowly, the soldiers began filing away in organized rows. But one person didn't move. Ethan. He stood frozen as Kelton disappeared behind the hangar, swallowed by the MP convoy. His chest rose and fell in sharp, uneven breaths. When his eyes drifted back to me, they were full of something raw and shaken. Understanding. For the first time, he understood that I had not destroyed his life. I had saved it. I had prevented him from being condemned for crimes he didn't mastermind. I had cleared him enough to survive this, but I did not look back at him. Not once. I kept my gaze forward, fixed on Rourke as she closed the briefing folder and turned to the generals. Weaver murmured to her, "That was clean." Rourke nodded. "And necessary." Behind us, Ethan's whisper floated on the breeze. "She saved me. She saved me, even after everything." But I didn't pause, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the words or the pain in them. Justice wasn't about his redemption. It wasn't about his forgiveness. It wasn't about him at all. Justice was about truth. And today, the truth had been dragged into the light for the entire base to witness. Kelton was gone. Ethan was exposed. Command was restored. And I walked off the platform with steady steps, leaving behind the man who finally understood what he had lost, not just rank or reputation or brotherhood, but the sister he never protected when she needed him most. The day after Kelton's arrest, the base felt different. The air was clearer. The tension that had been tightening JBLM for weeks loosened, but not with relief. More like the quiet after a storm when debris is still scattered and the damage has to be counted. Consequences had begun their slow march, and they were coming for everyone touched by the fallout, especially Ethan. I spent the morning in the administrative wing, sitting before a stack of classified documents, each bearing markings that once would have been hidden from me but now required my signature. The final report on the SEAL intel leak lay on top. Evidence reviewed. Findings confirmed, breach source identified, manipulation documented, and one line written in crisp, emotionless regulation language. Lieutenant Ethan Lockhart displayed negligent handling of classified access badges resulting in unauthorized exploitation by superior officer. I read it twice. Negligent handling. The military had a specific weight to that phrase, heavier than most civilians understood. In uniform, negligence could cost lives. Missions, national stability. But the next line mattered just as much. No indicators of intentional collusion. That line was the lifeline that saved Ethan's career from being burned to ash. But not from consequences. Weaver entered the room just as I picked up the pen. He stood quietly for a moment, watching me as if measuring whether signing this report cost me anything internally. It did not. I had carried heavier burdens. When you sign that, he said softly, you set the final tone. The military will follow your lead on how severely he is punished. I nodded. I know. And what do you think is fair? Fair. A difficult word for someone forged in a home where fairness never existed. I picked up the pen. Ethan was negligent. Ethan was careless. Ethan enabled the leak even without intention. But Ethan was also a victim of manipulation. The difference mattered. I pressed the pen to paper and signed with clean, deliberate strokes. The recommendation at the bottom stood unchanged. Rank reduction, probationary review, and administrative reassignment to a non-classified logistics unit. Not a dishonorable end. Not a career execution. But a fall. A hard one. Weaver exhaled. A just call. He placed a supporting hand on the edge of the table, not touching me, but steady, like he understood something larger lived beneath the surface. Justice is not vengeance, Commander. You remembered that. I stood. Justice and vengeance share a border, sir. The difference is intention. He gave a small nod of respect. Rourke will support this. The report will be finalized within the hour. He left. I remained still for a moment, letting the silence settle. Then I headed to the logistics building where Ethan was being held until reassignment orders arrived. The walk there was long enough for old echoes to rise, years of cruelty, years of imbalance, years of him laughing while I cried, him being praised while I was ignored. But the echoes came without attachment, without pain, without weight. It startled me how light they felt now. Perhaps that was its own kind of healing. When I reached the holding room, the guards snapped to attention. Commander, he is inside. He requested to speak with you. Requested, not demanded, not shouted, not used to being denied. Progress or desperation, it was too early to tell. The guard opened the door. Ethan sat alone at the metal table, his posture collapsed inward. The swagger he wore like armor had vanished. His uniform had been stripped of insignia. His name patch was missing. For a SEAL, losing rank was like losing a limb. He lifted his head when I entered. His eyes were red, not from rage this time, from reality. Reality hurt differently. Marin, he whispered, thank you for coming. I stayed standing. Ethan swallowed and looked down at his hands. They trembled. I read the report, he said quietly. I heard the recommendation. You could have destroyed me. You could have ended everything. You could have, I interrupted gently. I could have. But I did not. He let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob. Why? I chose my answer carefully. Because consequences are not meant to break people. They are meant to teach them. He blinked hard. The silence stretched thick and heavy. Then he spoke again, voice fragile. They are taking my rank. They are moving me to logistics. I will never see field work again. Never be part of the team. Never. He broke off, pressing a hand to his forehead. I do not know who I am without that. For the first time, he said something honest, something vulnerable, something that came from the rawest place inside him. And yet the question beneath it remained the same one he had asked all along. Can you save me from this? I stepped closer, but only by one pace. Ethan looked up, his voice cracked. Can we fix things? The question hung in the air like a plea, like a confession, like a child asking for a world that never existed. I met his eyes with steady clarity. Healing is not owed. It is earned. The words hit him harder than any disciplinary action command could issue. He winced, eyes closing as if bracing for impact. He whispered, almost too quiet for me to hear, I do not know how to earn it. The admission pierced deeper than his anger ever had. It was the truth, the real truth. Ethan had no idea how to build what he never learned at home. Kindness, accountability, loyalty that was not performative, empathy. He grew up in the same toxic house I did, but with a different role. He absorbed power, not responsibility, favoritism, not fairness. And now life demanded something from him he was never taught to give. His shoulders shook once, then again. He was not crying like a man. He was crying like a boy. The boy who stood by when I was hurt. The boy who followed a violent man because it was easier than questioning him. The boy who believed he would always outrank me. And now the world had inverted. I waited until he lifted his head again, eyes wet, voice raw. "I am sorry," he whispered, "for everything, for the things I did, for the things I let happen, for not seeing you, for not protecting you, for hurting you." I listened. I did not interrupt. I did not soften. I acknowledged the apology silently, but acknowledgement was not forgiveness. I finally spoke. Healing begins when you take responsibility, not when you ask for relief, not when the consequences hit, not when you feel the pain of losing something. Healing begins when you stop hiding from what you did. Ethan's chin trembled. "I want to be better," he whispered. "I want to change. I want to be someone different. Then start by accepting this fall." I gestured to his stripped uniform. "Let it break the man you were so you can rebuild the man you never became." His breath shuddered, but he nodded. A small, slow, painful nod. The beginning of something unfamiliar. Something that might one day become growth. Might. But that part was no longer connected to me. I stepped back. Ethan stood up abruptly, as if afraid I would leave before he found the courage to speak again. "Marin, one day, could we be—" I shook my head. "Do not ask that now. Do not reach for a future you have not earned." His mouth closed. The silence wrapped around us again, different this time. Heavy but honest. Final but not cruel. I walked toward the door. His voice followed me, trembling but clear. "Thank you for not destroying me." I paused with my hand on the door. I answered without turning around. "I did not spare you. I told the truth about you." Then I opened the door and stepped out, leaving him in the small room with the consequences of his choices and the faint beginning of accountability. Ethan had been spared the worst, but he had also been stripped of everything he had used to define himself. Sometimes that was its own kind of justice. And sometimes the collapse was the first step towards something real, but whatever happened next, he would walk it without me. I drove into Tacoma just after sunset, the sky a muted wash of gold fading into deepening blue, the kind of quiet evening that used to make me press my forehead against the car window as a kid and imagine a different life somewhere far from the house that waited at the end of the road. The streets were familiar in a way that tightened something in my chest, not nostalgia, but recognition of a past I had survived rather than lived. My orders were complete at JBLM. The report sent consequences issued, and with Kelton in custody and Ethan reassigned, the mission's immediate fire had been extinguished. There was only one task left before I could leave Washington behind. Closure. Real closure. The kind you cannot find in a courtroom or a command briefing. The kind that comes from standing in front of the ghosts that once tried to break you. I turned onto the cul-de-sac where my mother still lived with my stepfather, Alan. The porch light glowed too warmly, too deliberately, like a staged photo of a welcoming home. I parked and cut the engine. For a moment, I sat still and counted my breaths in 4 steady beats, the same rhythm that carried me through Syria, through covert operations, through the moment 4 generals saluted me in front of my stepbrother. 4 counts in, hold, 4 out, hold. My heartbeat slowed, my hands steadied. Then I stepped out of the car and walked toward the house that once felt like a battlefield long before I ever saw a real one. I knocked. The door opened so fast it startled me. My mother stood there, hand still on the knob, her eyes widening like she'd seen a ghost. I supposed technically she had. Her hand flew to her mouth and her voice cracked on my name. "Marin." She reached out as if to touch my face, then pulled her hand back, trembling. You're alive." The words wavered between disbelief and guilt. I looked at her. Really looked. She was older, more fragile, lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. But the flicker of fear when she glanced over her shoulder into the house was the same as it had been when I was a kid, the same fear that kept her silent. I stepped inside. Alan stood in the living room, frozen halfway through, standing up from his recliner. His expression shifted rapidly. shock calculation, and then a polished performance of paternal grief. He spread his arms in a slow, practiced gesture. Honey, you're home. I held his gaze. No emotion, no softness, no recognition of the role he tried to play. He walked toward me, voice heavy with manufactured sorrow. We mourned you, every day. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I said, You didn't mourn me. You celebrated the silence. He tried to frown to look wounded. Marin, sweetheart, that's not... I cut him off. I didn't come for forgiveness. The words were sharp, final. His face twitched. The performance cracked. Good. My mother hovered behind him, hands clasped, eyes darting between us. She whispered, We thought you died in Syria. We got the letter. We had a service. I turned to her slowly. You had a service for a daughter you never protected. Alan cleared his throat, slipping back into authority like a worn shoe. Now hold on. You don't get to come in here and... He stopped when I placed the folder on the kitchen table. A thick folder, marked with documentation dates, statements, evidence, old bruising reports from ER visits, school counselor notes, police call logs that were logged then withdrawn under pressure. His pressure. My mother stared at it, at the truth she'd spent years pretending wasn't real. Alan's voice hardened. What is that? Proof. Proof of everything you did. His jaw tightened. You cannot use that. It's old. Nobody will care. I leaned forward slightly. Tacoma PD cares. I filed a report before I drove here. The folder is their copy. His face drained of color. My mother gasped, covering her mouth again. He sputtered, Now wait. We can talk about this. We can talk like a family. Family. The word scraped something sharp inside me. You stopped being my family the day you put your hands on me, and the day you let Ethan do the same. His nostrils flared. That boy followed my lead. I taught him discipline. Discipline was not what you taught us. I took a step closer and he instinctively stepped back. You taught fear. You taught violence. And now you will answer for it. My mother reached for me, eyes swimming with panic. Marin, please don't do this. We're all different now. You don't understand how hard things were. I looked at her, my expression calm, steady. I understand perfectly. You are the one who didn't want to understand. She started crying, shoulders shaking. I always loved you. I wanted to protect you. You wanted to keep the peace I corrected. And you sacrificed me to do it. Silence stretched between us, thick as concrete. Alan tried again, desperation beginning to fray the edges of his voice. This doesn't have to go to court. You don't have to ruin our lives. I held his gaze. My life was already ruined. You just never paid the price for it. His face twisted with anger. There it was, the real man beneath the performance. He pointed at me, hand trembling. You think you're someone important now? You think wearing that uniform makes you better than us? I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. It's not the uniform. It's the truth. The truth you ran from for 20 years. The truth you beat into me because it threatened your control. His voice dropped to a hiss. Nobody will believe you. You should be careful. That sounded like a threat, a familiar one, a rehearsed one, and yet tonight it held no power. I stepped even closer, face inches from his. I have survived war zones. I have walked out of ambush sites. I have buried people whose courage you couldn't imagine. You don't frighten me anymore. His facade finally broke. The fear seeped through. Not fear of me. Fear of consequences. Real ones. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look at it. I already knew what it was. Confirmation from Tacoma Police Department that the report had been formally logged. Alan sank into the nearest chair like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. My mother sobbed softly against the counter. I stood by the table, hands behind my back, in a stance that came naturally. Controlled. Steady. Resolute. I came here for closure, I said quietly. Not reconciliation. Not forgiveness. Not to reopen anything. Just to close it. Permanently. My mother whispered, Can't we ever go back? I shook my head. There is no back, only forward, and forward doesn't include this house. I gathered nothing. There was nothing here that belonged to me. As I turned to leave, Alan's voice cracked, half broken, half furious. You think you're better than us! I opened the door and looked back one final time. No, I just finally know my worth. And you don't get to define it anymore. I stepped outside. The night air was cool and clean, free of history, free of fear. I saw the cruiser pull up at the end of the street. 2 officers stepping out, professional, ready. They walked past me toward the house. I didn't stay to watch. Justice wasn't a show. It was a line finally drawn. I got into my car, closed the door gently, and exhaled. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 out. Hold. The rhythm felt different tonight, lighter. As I drove away, the porch light behind me flickered, then steadied, then faded into the distance until it wasn't part of my world anymore. When I drove back through the JBLM gates the next morning, the base looked the same as always. Soldiers jogging along the perimeter trail, MPs checking IDs, the low rumble of cargo aircraft on the runway. But something inside me had shifted, not dramatically, not explosively. More like the way a locked joint finally settles back into place after years of tension. A quiet correction. A realignment. Peace was not loud. It was subtle. I parked near the operations building and walked toward the entrance, the early morning air cool against my face. The sun had barely risen, casting a faint gold line along the horizon. The kind of light that never announces itself but still manages to change the whole sky. That was how this felt. Subtle. Steady. As I approached the front steps, I saw Chief Warrant Officer Ramsey waiting by the door, hands tucked behind his back posture, unmistakably military even in an off-duty sweatshirt. He nodded once when he saw me. Morning, Commander. His tone held something new. Not suspicion, not confusion. Respect. Earned, not demanded. Morning, Chief. He studied my expression. Long night. Closure, I said simply. His eyes softened. That kind of closure can echo for a long time. But you look steadier today. I am. He cracked a small smile. Good. Because the generals are waiting for you. My stomach tightened, not in fear, but in anticipation. Mission briefings were familiar territory. Comfortable even. The personal battles of the last few days had been far harder than any operation I ran overseas. We walked together down the corridor. Soldiers stepped aside with a level of deference they had not shown me before. Some nodded respectfully. Others simply avoided eye contact, still processing the events of the last 48 hours, the helicopters, the generals, the arrest, the reveal of who I really was. Word travels fast on a base. Myth travels faster. When we reached the briefing room, Ramsey opened the door for me. The generals were already there. General Rourke stood at the head of the table, posture without flaw, her presence filling the room the way a lighthouse fills a shoreline. Weaver sat beside her reviewing satellite images. Warren flipped through personnel files. Trent typed something into a secure terminal, her expression focused. Rourke looked up as I entered. Commander Lockhart. Her tone carried that steel-edged warmth only seasoned commanders could master, the kind that said she expected excellence and believed she would get it. At ease, I replied, muscle memory guiding my stance even before my mind caught up. Rourke gestured for me to sit. We have a few matters to address. First, the fallout from the Kelton investigation. It is spreading faster than anticipated. Warren set a classified folder in front of me. 12 officers across multiple installations, 4 contractors, 2 civilian analysts with possible ties to foreign entities. The web is broader than we believed. Trent added, your intel exposed a corridor of unauthorized data flow that has been active for nearly 18 months. Without your documentation, they would have buried the trail under layers of bureaucratic noise. Weaver nodded toward me. You stopped that. I accepted the recognition silently. Then Rourke shifted to the next topic. The second matter concerns your status. My pulse steadied. This was the moment I had expected. Your temporary return under sovereign ghost protocols has ended. You are once again fully active in JSOC. A formal reinstatement ceremony is unnecessary given your classification level. Your operational record remains intact. Decorations preserved, rank confirmed. She held my gaze. Do you understand the weight of resuming this program? I do. And you accept? Yes, ma'am. Rourke gave a single approving nod. Good. Weaver slid another folder toward me, this one thinner marked with a red stripe. Your next assignment will be issued within 72 hours. Given your performance and familiarity with the current network investigation, you will likely continue oversight on the Kelton Web, this time with full authority. Warren added quietly, You should know. People on the Hill are already asking about you, the right people, the ones who still believe in cleaning house instead of protecting old power. A strange mix of emotions stirred relief, caution, readiness, purpose, all braided together. Then Trent, ever perceptive, leaned forward slightly. This mission took a personal toll. Do you need decompression time before redeployment? I shook my head. I have already taken it. Rourke exchanged a subtle glance with the others. Then she dismissed me with a level of respect few commanders ever received. Proceed as you see fit, Commander. You have earned that latitude. When I stepped out of the briefing room, Ramsay waited in the hallway, leaning against the wall with arms crossed. He raised an eyebrow. How did it go? I exhaled slowly. They reinstated me. He cracked a proud smile. I figured they would. You move like someone who belongs in a war room, not a contractor cubicle. It was his version of a compliment. I accepted it. When I stepped outside into the morning air, the sun had fully risen, letting warm light spill over the base buildings and distant treetops. I walked toward the barracks area, the gravel crunching under my boots. That was when I saw the envelope taped neatly to the door of my temporary housing unit. My name was written in Ethan's handwriting, not dramatic, not heavy, just my name. I hesitated before peeling it off and stepping inside. The room felt both familiar and temporary, like a place meant only to hold me while I learned something I had avoided for years. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper. His handwriting used to be messy. Now it was steadier, as if he had taken the time to write slowly, deliberately. Marin, I know you probably won't read this whole letter. I know I don't deserve your time. But I wanted to say what I never said when it mattered. I am sorry for everything, for not protecting you, for listening to him, for believing him, for being proud of the wrong things. I don't know who I am without the uniform I lost, but I want to learn. Not because I want forgiveness, but because I want to stop being somebody who causes harm without even seeing it. I won't ask you to talk to me. I won't ask you to fix anything. I won't ask you for another chance at being siblings. I just want you to know I'm going to try, with or without you. Thank you for not ending my career. Thank you for giving me the chance to rebuild what I broke. I hope one day I can make peace with myself the way you seem to have made peace with your past. You don't owe me anything. Ethan. I folded the letter carefully and set it on the nightstand. I did not cry. I did not smile. I did not feel satisfaction or regret. What I felt was something still and quiet. Acceptance. Not of him, not of the past. Acceptance that his healing was no longer tied to me, and mine was no longer tied to him. I walked to the window and pulled the blinds open. The view wasn't remarkable. Just the training field, a few soldiers jogging the perimeter, a flag lifting in the breeze. But for the first time in years, I felt myself breathe, not for survival, not for grounding, just because I could. 4 in, hold, 4 out, hold. The rhythm felt clean, unburdened, a rhythm that belonged to someone no longer hunted by ghosts, but someone ready to become one again by choice. There was peace in that, but not silence, never silence. The world I served was too loud, too dangerous, too corrupt, and too worth fighting for. As the morning sunlight warmed the room, a single thought settled with calm certainty. I was ready for whatever came next. By the time evening settled over JBLM, the base had quieted into that strange in-between state where the day's noise faded but the night shift had not yet fully taken over. I sat alone in my temporary quarters gear bag, half packed on the bed, uniform jacket slung neatly over the back of the chair. The air smelled faintly of jet fuel from the runways and pine from the surrounding woods. Familiar, comforting in a way that only a life lived on bases could be. My tablet vibrated on the desk. A single encrypted ping, classified routing priority low, but locked behind 4 layers of authentication. Not the kind of message sent casually. I entered the sequence. The screen brightened. A plain text line appeared. No signature. No header. No sender information. Just 4 words. Tower 8 sends regards. I stared at it. My heartbeat didn't spike. My breathing didn't break. But I felt something shift, subtle and deep, like the tightening of a wire pulled from a distant direction. Tower 8. Months ago, buried somewhere in the Sovereign Ghost documents, I had seen references to Tower 4, the shadow cell believed to have orchestrated the ambush in Syria that declared me KIA. But Tower 8, that was new. A different node, a different arm of the same network. Someone who knew my identity had resurfaced. Someone who knew I was alive. Someone who knew exactly where to send a message without triggering any flags. The message held no threat, but it didn't need to. It was a seed, a signal, a reminder. The war wasn't over. Someone else had been watching. Someone else had been waiting. I encrypted the screen and slid the tablet into my gear bag, the motion smooth and practiced. The room felt smaller suddenly, the quiet thicker. Ramsey knocked twice before cracking the door open. Commander orders came through. "You'll want to see this." I took the folder he offered, flipping it open. Inside was a travel authorization stamped with JSOC clearance, a temporary redeployment itinerary, and a mission outline so heavily redacted it looked more like a chessboard than a document. Destination undisclosed, duration indefinite. Operational posture, off record. He watched me gauging my expression. "Looks like they want you wheels up at Dodo 600. I nodded, understood. He hesitated. "You good?" The question was simple. The layers underneath were not. Good. What did that even mean? Did he mean safe, focused, stable? Did he mean something softer, something like healed? I met his eyes. "I'm ready." He seemed satisfied. Or maybe he simply trusted the answer. He gave a respectful nod. "Whatever comes next, Commander, give them hell." I gave the faintest smile. I always do. After he left, I finished packing. The room emptied one piece at a time until only the essentials remained. Clothes, uniform, tablet, sealed files. A small worn patch from my old unit Task Force Gray stitched into the lining of my bag where no one would ever look. I ran my thumb over the fabric once before closing the zipper. When the bag was done, I sat on the bed for a moment. The quiet pressed in again. Not heavy, just honest. Closure rarely arrived tied with a bow. Mine had arrived in fragments: Ethan's letter, Kelton's arrest, the report logged in Tacoma, the 4 generals saluting me, and now this Tower 8. The next thread in a web I had been chasing since the day my convoy burned. I stood and put on my jacket, fastening each button with deliberate precision. My dog tags, not the public ones, but the classified pair used only for JSOC, rested cool against my collarbone. When I stepped outside, the night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wet pavement from a recent drizzle. The base lights glowed in neat lines, and somewhere in the distance, a C-17 rumbled down the runway, preparing for departure. I walked toward the flight line, boots steady on the concrete. A young MP snapped to attention as I passed. "Welcome back, ma'am." I nodded once. Not acknowledgement, not dismissal. Something in between. Something that meant thank you without needing to say it. At the edge of the tarmac, I paused, watching as a transport helicopter was prepped for morning departure. Its rotors secured its cabin, half loaded with equipment. A different aircraft would take me wherever I was going tomorrow. But this moment, this stillness felt necessary. Closure wasn't a final door. It was the quiet turning of a hinge. I breathed in, slow and steady. 4 in. Hold. 4 out. Hold. The same rhythm that had carried me through war zones, betrayals, interrogations, ambushes, and the dining hall where my stepbrother tried to humiliate me, only to watch 4 generals salute instead. Justice wasn't loud. It didn't need to roar or scream or announce itself. Justice was patient. It waited in silence, gathered evidence, documented truth, and struck only when the moment mattered most. And now, justice was calling me again. Not with anger, not with vengeance, with purpose, with clarity, with the certainty that the next mission would lead me closer to the hand that had first tried to erase me. I picked up my bag and headed toward the officer transport wing. The night stretched ahead, quiet and endless the way the world feels just before a storm breaks. As I walked, I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me worth returning to. Ahead was the mission. Ahead was truth. Ahead was Tower 8. Fade out. There's a moment at the end of every mission when the noise finally fades and you're left with only one truth. The people who should have protected you are often the first to doubt you. Sometimes they dismiss you. Sometimes they laugh at you. Sometimes they tell you what you will never become. And sometimes, like in my story, they stand in a room full of people and try to make you feel small, certain you'll never rise past the version of you they decided was acceptable. But they never see the strength you've built in silence. They never notice the battles you fought alone. They never imagine the day you'll walk back into the same room and stand tall enough that even generals turn to face you. If you're still reading this, maybe you know that feeling. Maybe you've lived it. Maybe you've been underestimated by the very people who were supposed to lift you up. Maybe you were the quiet one in your family, the overlooked one, the easy target. Maybe someone told you who you were allowed to be, and you spent years proving they were wrong. If you feel comfortable, if it feels safe for you, share your story below. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be complete. Just your truth in whatever shape it takes. Because someone out there is reading quietly. Someone out there has lived the same pain and is waiting for a sign that they're not alone. Someone out there needs to know that being underestimated isn't a life sentence. It's a beginning. And maybe your story is the one they need tonight. You never know who you will help simply by speaking up. You never know whose courage you'll awaken just by sharing the moment you finally stood your ground, or the day you walked away from someone who tried to control you, or the second you realized your worth didn't depend on their approval. If you've ever been dismissed, if you've ever been belittled, if you've ever been told you're not enough, not capable, or not worthy, if anyone has ever laughed at your dreams, minimized your strength, or treated your pain as an inconvenience, this is your space. A place where your voice matters. A place where your story won't be ignored. A place where someone somewhere will read your words and whisper, "Me too." And if today isn't the day you want to share, that's okay. Just know this: you are not invisible. You are not weak for surviving what others will never understand. And you are absolutely not defined by the people who failed to protect you. Justice isn't loud, it's patient, and sometimes speaking your truth is the first step toward it.